traditionally done anything, right? So you think it should be like,
The first announcement I would like to make, I'm going to make a few of them. One, I'm going to resign, just to let people know. I've got too many commitments with the grandchildren, and I've been on for 20 years now. I've been the chair for 15, and it's just gotten too much for me. It's we're in the land of the days of computer and digital and emails, and I just can't keep up with the pace. There's just so much being thrown at me. I need a break while I have these young children on their feet all the time. So I just want to make that. I have to send my letter in, but I am going to resign. I think 20 years is not enough for anyone to do this. We have a new member. I was looking this morning, and he started, I think, in 1990 on the Shellfish Advisory Board, and served with me in 98 and 99, and took a hiatus in 2000. So now he's back after a hiatus, which is fantastic. So we're going to just keep this tradition going, and I hope that we're going to get some more people, some more younger folks to step up to the plate and that are, that maybe have a little more time and are a little more computer savvy and that kind of stuff than I am at this point. So let's go on with our regular session now. You all know Chick though, right? I mean, I don't have to do any more formal. Nope. No. Yeah. Yep. Okie dokie. So what we first need to do is approve the minutes of our last meeting from Thursday, May 15th. It was at 7 o'clock in the town hall.
Second question on the, in red there. I think that was Janice who were on that. Didn't read that.
Yes, it was.
He was there.
Yep. Mm-hmm, definitely.
good job.
Okay, so I see that there's a few things on here that we're going to be discussing after the meeting today. Is there anything website or here yet?
I just texted them.
Okay. All right, is there anyone who wants to make any changes to these minutes? Good. All right, I would like to make a motion that we approve the minutes of Thursday, May 15th. Second that? Okay. All in favor? So that was easy. So we're going to get right on to the Shellfish Department update. Yep.
So I have not prepared my monthly report yet for May, so when I get that done, I'll send it in by the 15th to the town administrator, and I'll copy Shellfish Advisory so you get it. It's just been too crazy with coaching and those tasks, and I haven't had a to sit at the computer. But I can tell you that in the month of May, we met with the National Park Service about areas for coaching in the Heron River, and we're working on expanding those in a subsequent time once we get our first approval for the areas that have been outlined for coaching through the state and the Park Service. We have phase 1 that's already been documented, and it's at the state for NEPA review right now. And once that goes through, then we're going to add on other places in the harbor that have been traditionally coached and weren't on the original map. So that happened in the month of May. We did the contaminated cohort relay. We got 400 bushels, and we planted probably close to 150 bushels at Burton Baker Beach. I'm sure you've seen the big red buoys that say closed, and we have a lot of signage up at Indian Neck describing the program. And then the rest we put in Chitlins Cove, so it should be a good fall for cohogs. There was one load that was particularly filled with small middle-end product, so it really looked good this year. There's a good mix of variety of sizes for that. So Chitlins Cove, that'll open when it opens on the last Sunday in October, and if all goes well, Johnny's plan with Burton Baker Beach. The state comes in and does stringent testing in August. If those shellfish are deemed safe, which they usually are without a problem, we would open that after September 16th. The area is still a Wednesday, Sunday only time period, so we would open it from the 16th to the 30th and just let some of the wrecks have 4 or 5 days in there to harvest. And then we're going to close it again and basically save it for next summer. And then we will do the rotational closures back and forth between the breakwater and Burton Baker. So that's the plan with the rec area co-op we make. We have had 5 mulch deliveries so far from Atlantic Capes. We get the whole sea clam shell for free, and we pay Daniels for trucking. We've gotten 5. I think we actually got our 6th yesterday, but we got 5 deliveries in the month of May, which is awesome. And then I am on a subcommittee of the Mass Shellfish Officers Association that is monitoring the Massachusetts Shellfish Initiative. And us constables are getting together. There's a subset, I think it's 7 or 8 of us that are meeting, and we're going to be keeping track of what MSI is doing and when we can chime in, and make our opinions known. As everybody understands, I'm sure, constables are proponents of home rule. And our towns are so different and our fisheries are so different. There's just no one blanket rule that we feel should be applied. So we will be advocating strongly for a home rule and for the independence of each of our small towns. So that's about it for my update right now. But the next item is mine. So I'll just keep going.
How come we're still using Daniels also?
Because I did a bid for, I submitted a request for proposals, and,
We don't have town equipment to do that?
I'm sorry?
We don't have town equipment to do that?
Not yet, they're concerned about cross-contamination.
Between,
The trucks that go and take garbage to the landfill, or, I'm sorry, I don't know where it goes, the CMAC or whatever it is, not CMAC, CMAX.
well, Daniels is trucks are taking something off the case. What are they taking before?
They're going, I'm not really sure if they're going empty or not.
We know they're not going empty, but that doesn't pay a bill. So I mean, if they're hauling tonnage or something, we should find out how we can do the same thing.
I have asked and been denied, and so in the future I can bring it back up, but for this year we are booked in with Daniels and I feel comfortable with it. But I'm happy to go back to the DPW. They are very short-staffed right now, so there's no way they could do it. But they can't invest the extra time involved in going all the way to Rhode Island after, because they're short 4 or 5 people right now. But it's something that we can look into in the future. We have a great working relationship with the DPW. They are exactly why our coaching is going so well.
Nancy, I want to ask you a question of the co-op relay. How are the animals that you brought in that came in last year? How was the mortality rate? Did they seem to be healthy and strong and
We did
dry?
a very dense planting because we planted at high density because we were worried here about the messaging. And so we said we would move them then, and we did. We had a number of AmeriCorps days, and we probably moved, I want to say it was like 160 bushels maybe it was 80. I know we did 80, and then I forget how many others we did, so we did maybe 100 bushels that we dug up by hand and moved, but they were so densely planted that we think some of the mortality was because they didn't have enough room. We don't expect that this year at all. They look great. Okay, they look really good. And it's a learning process.
So we're going to go on to the landing sites.
Okay.
Right, one other question. You said the culch is coming now. How long has the culch been
Last year's coach was overwintered from the fall to now, and now I'm already working on next year. So the coach deliveries that we have will be for next June.
So what they're bringing now is for next year?
Yeah.
So we could get it any time of the year if we paid attention, so that the DPW wasn't overtaxed.
It depends more on the availability of the clamshell, because right now they're able to fish in an area where they're processing in Rhode Island, and they can keep good track and get the clams, but the clam fishing areas are changing. So once they go farther offshore, they might not be landing in Rhode Island. So it was at the request of the sea clam fishery that we get it going as soon as possible, so that they made sure they could fill our order of 10 loads.
Thank you.
Just something, we've been planting these shells earlier in the season, and we're finding that it's not really catching back. It was because of that one year that we took the shells out, they were full of maggots. We ended up having, didn't want to do that again, that's when Andy was working, that the shell didn't sit or winterize.
Right now,
And we had a huge problem in the bag. So we started doing this earlier. But as everybody can see, people that are here in these hats, there's a certain time that you put them out. Yeah, if you put them out too early, they just mung up and nothing catches at all. And I've been hearing that the COVID's not doing that well, we're not catching set. So,
well, the Cove caught an amazing set last year.
good.
Really looks
Okay.
good, the coach that we put down. We have so much coach when you're trying to put out, it's probably 400,000 pounds of mulch that we're putting out. We need a number of weeks to do it, and then you have to plan on the times.
Okay.
So, we kind of dedicated the month of June this year, and, we will see, because of course we know it's an issue that they can run up, so we'll keep track, we know where to and when.
Okay.
Herring River is where we did our very first loads the first week of June, so if that mounts up, then we'll know, okay, can't do that.
Okay.
But we definitely, the Cove caught a great set. Herring River caught a good set last year. Blackfish Creek did not. Where else did we put it? Behind where our propagation bed is, that didn't catch too great. That was some of the last set we put out last year, because our barge was so compromised that we just kept close to home. So, but we'll keep track of it, so that it's a good point. And also, because of those, and because of that experience that was had with the maggots, that's why we get it early and let it really, it's gonna have a whole year.
That's a good thing. Okay, thanks.
Okay, we're going to be off to the next topic, which is the Vibrio.
So I spoke with Michael Moore and Eric Hickey at the Department of Public Health. They said that this can fall, so the issue at stake is that during Vibrio, we as a town requested an exemption so that we could have one pickup location from the town marina. That is working well, very well, for most people. There are a couple of people who have come and said, I'd really rather have it I can get my oysters into ice quicker and have it be better for public safety if I did it at the landing near my grant. So we don't want to take away our exemption, because frankly it's working really well for most people, probably 99%. Therefore, we just asked how could we accommodate the request of a couple of individuals, and they said basically what you're doing is following DPH's normal regulations. So what we will do, they said we can do this according to our local authority, which is what we love. We will work out with the two grant holders that have requested it, kind of a little memorandum of understanding. I'm not going to put it in the regs just yet, because I want to make sure that it works. But we'll have a memorandum of understanding so that we know more or less what the market days are, and we can patrol and check and do the inspections that we normally do on the pier. And we're going to give it a try and just see how it works. And I feel like we're on the same page. and it shouldn't be an issue for us to be able to be in those places. But we do have to have a little bit of a framework because our patrol areas are large from, Lieutenant's Island to Herring River. So we just want to make sure that when it's market time, we're able to inspect from time to time, just like we do on the pier. So we're basically going to be following normal DPH regs, but we will have memorandums of understanding with the 2 grant holders that are going to work outside of the exemption. Is that clear?
Yes, where are those grants located?
One is off of Powers Landing, the other is off Indian Neck Breakwater. So 2 big parking lots, bathing beaches, but this again happens at low tide, so usually not too populated with cars and cars. And of course, one of the things is, it's a multi-use parking lot, so it's not like anybody has free reign. Every user group needs to be respected, like their use of that land.
Okay, hand up back there, Stephen.
So does this mean that in Indian Neck, people from Field Point will be able to go there versus going out on the highway?
No, it's only for the grant holders in CCB 13. And the
Grant holder.
grant holders.
Grant hold.
Well, there's another one who said he might end up using it as well.
So everybody has to sign up to be part of this.
They have to come to me and it has to be approved by the Shellfish Department. Everything's in good working standing and in good working order.
So if they're down at Field Point, can we sign up?
No, you have to go here.
Why? Trying to get away from the traffic congestion on the marina. We're having parking problems there on the marina.
This is the first time I'm hearing that you guys are.
It gets congested to the point, it gets congested to the point that people with the trailers can't even get in the parking lot now in the summer.
I thought the whole idea behind this was that if we're gonna open up new areas, so the people in those areas.
Closer to them.
I'm glad the gentleman sitting next to me gets the right to do this, but wouldn't we want to do this for everybody so that they have a better practice?
Where on Field Point would you like to bring a big truck?
I have no idea.
If you can't bring it to Field Point, why can't you go to the jetty? It's a big parking lot.
Oh, you want to go to the jetty?
Some people may.
If you come up.
I don't even thought through this program.
Well, they can just sign up for you if they need to use it.
I bring it back to the state and let them know.
Yo, I want to go to the jetty. I want to go to the jetty.
I'm tired of getting truck jumped at the pier. That's when you're waiting longer than other people, and then people come late and jump in front of you.
I don't want to have to deal with that traffic going up on the highway. And we're already, the last 2 times I've dropped off it down here, we're shoved way back in the corner back there. It's,
We got cones up where we used to do it now. There's cones up, but I don't know what that's about.
That's about training.
If you're gonna have a drop-off point, at the breakwater,
Yeah, I
sign me up.
I want to go back to Suzanne again, because nobody ever expressed an interest to me before. Nobody. The only person that ever expressed an interest has been Mike Termonte and Chopper. Those are the only 2 people. So it's the first time hearing about it, and if it's going to be a lot.
Well, because we've been told we have to go here. So the reason why nobody has said anything is because basically, we all wanna, get in line.
Right, other
But-
people did come to me and ask. So I just was responding to incoming requests. If it's a lot of people, then I want to go back and talk to Suzanne, make sure it's okay. Let's talk about hours and I'll just want to let the state know. So if you are interested, please shoot me an email or let me know so I can figure out how many people we're talking about. Maybe I'll do it in a crier and just put it out there if people are interested, so I get a real handle on how many people, but I had no idea, so.
Well, it's for the rest of the year, the pier's not a problem. Okay, but in the summertime, it's a hassle,
Yeah, I understand.
Yes, a question, will you have to, do a MU, memorandum of understanding with each of these individuals?
Yeah.
To meet our regs with the
It's not really, it's so that the Shellfish Department, this would be a change from our operations. And because we are spread thin, because of Vibrio control, and because of our propagation activities, we're small staff. I would just want to know what market days are. I know that these things change. I know they can change by the hour. So I would just want to establish communication protocols so that we can adequately monitor transfers to dealers.
Well, it sounds like we're being asked to be a little bit more flexible in the pickup places, so, I guess we'll have to look at how we can do that. What needs to be done.
Ellen?
Yeah, back in the day when I was the person who was talking to the Department of Public Health, I was talking to Michael Moore, when I was on the Shellfish Committee. Their real issue was that if we wanted this variance, which Nancy referred to as a concession, they almost never give them. Ever. This is very unusual. And Nancy, what I remember being said repeatedly, and you probably heard this too, was, okay, you want to do this, you have to absolutely be sure that it's going to be monitored.
That's what they say.
Yeah, and, you know, we said, okay, it's going to be more convenient. So, yeah, sure, it would be good if everybody could be doing it at the most convenient location and have it happen, you know, in terms of Vibrio. Well, but they may not want to do it, not because Nancy isn't trying, but because, you know, the guy understood everything I was saying about people and the traffic and everything, but he said it doesn't matter. There has to be an official there. There has to be somebody from the Shellfish Department looking.
What you have to understand is we're supposed to land our products at our designated landings. That's where the trucks are supposed to meet. Field Point, Omaha, Old Wharf have no access for 18-wheelers or even big box trucks. So the variance was made to try to accommodate shellfishermen in the town of Wolfley, so we would have a large area where these big trucks could turn around and lots of trucks could meet. So now we're going back to,
This is,
A
you
lot.
just hit something.
right, that
It's
is
not
why
your landing. Your landing is Sewell's
where we're
Landing.
supposed to
And
land.
so Chopper, Paul Lumiere, their landing is Indian Neck. Michael's Landing is Powers Landing. That's why we're able to do it, because the oysters are coming off. If we set up Indian Neck as a separate transfer area, it would be just like doing it at the pier.
Well,
They're not going to do that.
Why don't we ask that question? I was misunderstood, I guess, through the conversations, because when you said you were going to look at 2 different landings, I believe those landings were going to be open for the public, being all shellfishermen,
So-
which I think some of these people in this room may have been on the wrong page too, because it sounds like they want to go to a different landing.
Right, so
my question to you is, why can't we apply?
Because it would be asking for a second variance. It would be asking for a second variance because it's not your landing. So that's my bad. what I said before. The deal is that we are allowing people to transfer per DPH normal regulations at their point of landing. Michael comes off at Powers Landing, he can do it there. Chopper and Paul come off at Indian Neck, they can do it there. You guys would have to do it, if you're coming from Field Point, you'd have to do it at Sewell's Gutter, you can't do it. So if I was to ask for you to come and do it at Indian Neck, it would be the exact same paperwork as for doing it at the pier. And I'm not going to go out
Is
to.
there anywhere we can drive off the beach at the jetty?
What?
Just drive down the beach to the jetty and drive off the beach.
That's the point.
The point
We're going to
that
drive across, I don't think that, you have to go across the rec area.
Watch me.
And then the rec area too, on Sundays and Wednesdays in the summertime, is filled with cars with recreational shellfisher. So, that might be an issue for maybe Wednesdays and Sundays would be excluded from pickups because that is a full parking lot at low tide.
How come we can't ask the state?
For another variance?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm willing to do that.
Well, let me ask you a question. Is the program we had working well?
Yeah.
So that we got something we can say to the state that we are pretty kids, that we can do it right, so why can't we ask?
Yeah.
I need to could think about the, I guess, you know, the amount of capital that I use with the state. I want to be mindful and respectful of what I ask. So I'd like to take it back and chew on it with my team.
Ben, did you have something you wanted to ask?
Oh, I was just gonna ask Nancy, what's the difference between driving across the rec area and driving down to Mayo Beach with all the kids on the beach? You're gonna do the same thing, you gotta avoid them and pay attention, you can't go 90 miles an hour down the beach.
I have to look at the common regulations and the other regulations to see if you're allowed to drive on the rec area.
Don't you drive on the rec area?
No, we do not.
You don't?
No. But we do drive on Main.
I don't know if you can get around all this.
Figure it out if you're allowed to do it.
Well, what's the state do if you ask? You just try.
I just want to think about the amount of political capital that I spend in the state. I just want to think about like measuring that. And I want to talk with you about it, and maybe I'll shoot an email out to see how many people would be interested in it. And kind of, I'd like to do some research before I commit. If you will allow me that time to kind of look into this, see how many people we're talking about, think about what else I have coming down the dock with DPH that I might want to, be asking for. I'd like to do a little homework before I just commit to doing something.
So Nancy, does that mean that if we will be able, you'll be able to open it up to like Michael Job for the people, and once they get to you and do the memorandum of understanding, or are we going to hold the whole program?
No, I'm not going to hold that Michael, we'll get together, we'll come up with a memorandum. And I think we can do that because that's according to DPH rules.
Right.
That's nothing different from what the regulations state.
And I think like anything, this is a work in progress, and I want to thank Nancy for doing this extra work for us and making this opportunity even a chance for this to work. So we should be working together with Nancy to move this forward instead of just trying to make potholes for people to fall into. Stephen?
So we're doing Mayo Beach, we're gonna do all of Mayo Beach, and we're just doing the end towards Powers Land?
Anybody, I reach out to every single grant holder to ask them if they, and every single oyster grant, anybody who's farming oysters from Mayo Beach to Powers Landing, and asked if they would want to use that landing. And there's one other group that might.
One.
Yep. I did reach out to clam grant holders.
Well,
Because
there's oysters
that's
are more than just one more grant one, so I'm just asking.
Well, there might be new product out there.
And just, okay.
Again, if you're interested and you have oysters on Mayo Beach and you'd like to come off at Powers Landing, by all means, let me know and I'll add you to the list. Because
Now, what do
that,
we do about Egg Island then? Can we go to the Powers? Because that's where we foot access.
that would be, you could either do by foot or you would do by boat here.
Just asking.
For oysters.
Okay.
Yeah, I did not ask people on it
Okay, just-
because most people.
That's our access point, that's why I'm asking questions.
Yeah, I've never seen any product landed from Egg Island on Powers. Most of it goes by boat. All of it that I've seen goes by
Oh.
boat, so.
We don't want to deal with congestion at the marina. In the parking lot. Might work out to our benefit.
Sure.
I just wanted to make a point. Well, something said, Helen said, that made me feel very uncomfortable. It was that everything we do has to be monitored, right? Like we're a bunch of criminals, okay? We're not criminals, all right? Everyone in here knows what the hell they're doing with Shellfish. That I looked around the room and I was like, we all, whoever's still in this business at this point, probably knows how to manage Shellfish.
Yeah, so the other thing was, so we got 1 year the first year, okay? The DPH said, and DMS said, okay, we're gonna try for a year, and the results were great. You know, their video record is great. And therefore, they then let us do it some more. So, right now, the good news, to answer what Chip said, Chip Morris, is that we have a track record, a good track record. So it would be worth a try, maybe, given that it's all in favor of management. It's not just like, oh, lazy people. It's like, get it into the, truck, the wholesale dealer's truck as soon as possible, which is good for management, even though you're supposed to be priced. So the good track record, for how many years is it now? 5? Yeah.
I just want to make a comment about that. The non-coms don't have to ice anything.
But yes, they do.
They haven't ever before. When did they have to do?
They don't.
Well, we have the red.
I know, but.
People are getting sick from Vibrio, and it's all our fault.
I'm sorry. Hello? If they're not icing, I think your permit should be pulled. We have regulations, sorry, yes, don't hate me. We have a regulation about that.
I have a hard time understanding why our Vibrio regulation is under the rec and not under commercial, because there's no state requirement for rec, Vibrio protocols.
Says it all.
I know, but that's why we have it in our own regs, so. Sorry.
That would need to be a topic for another meeting.
Yeah.
Because we really need to be moving on here because we have. Ginny?
It's just one quick statement, I'm probably stating the obvious, but I've spent the past, 9, 10 months working on the parking task force. And anything we can do to alleviate traffic at the pier would have ripple effects on all of our regions in a positive way. So I know we all know that, but I want you to know that we've done down studies.
A question for you, Ginny. How is parking at the pier, I mean, not parking at the pier, how busy does the Indian Neck parking lot get in the summertime and the Seashells parking lot? I'm not there to.
We didn't really look at those two parking lots. They weren't part of our scope, because we don't get any complaints, so I guess that must mean
That's
they're.
really watching.
Yeah, I mean, I know personally Indian Neck looks full on some days, but there's areas there that could be designated. I know one of the things in the parking task force we talked about, remember early on, I came to your meeting, was about trying to designate a loading zone for the fishermen. We had that, but just said we talked about that, at here, but I just think, I know that the biggest problem that, we're encountering employees of restaurants, galleries, et cetera, parking at the pier. I mean, there's a lot of parking issues right now. And I think the expectation is that once we get dredging, it's going to be worse because more people will be able to use their slips. So anything we can do preemptively, I think is a positive.
So I just want to recap my to-do list as a takeaway for everyone. I'm going to send out a crier to see who else might be interested in transferring at Indian Neck or Powers Landing. I am going to talk to Suzanne, the beach administrator, to see about her thoughts on us really expanding this to more than what I had originally said, not knowing that there was so much interest. And then I will talk to my team about, shifts and ability to just make sure we can do sporadic checks and just talk to them about the idea in general. Have I captured everything that we done?
Richard?
Now that we've established a pretty good track record as far as this Vibrio season goes. And it was, the people that I delivered to, we never had a problem. We always met at the South Wellfleet Fire Department. And that way you're keeping a truck out of town. They're there, but then because everybody had to move down the pier, we went down the pier too. I don't see an EPO driving around down there, the constant presence. I know that we're under surveillance all the time down there by camera, but I'd kind of like to go back to delivering in South Wellfleet.
So I will tell you that the South Wellfleet Fire Station is something that they said they do not want to go back to. They actually named that in their conversation with me. Sorry.
Big brother.
Why not? Agree.
All right, probably move on here. Thank you. So we need to do some regulation changes, and we've been trying to keep our regulation changes to be, only have to bother the selectmen for X amount of meetings instead of having a regulation change in every single meeting, trying to group them. So we have a few important changes. Nancy, I'm going to let you take it's the domicile resident. We would like to include the 6-month residency. We really haven't been able to uncover exactly when that came out. Michael seemed to have an idea that it was while you were serving, Michael? Is that long, that?
Legal.
So it was quite a while ago. Do you remember that, Chip? Do you remember why that was taken out?
Why it was taken out?
Was it taken out?
I don't remember it being taken out when I was here.
Do you know what Michael does?
6-month residency?
The 6-month
That's
residency.
illegal.
It was, we were handed a memo from the town council that we had her take it out of thing, because at that time it was illegal.
Okay, so it must have changed between now and then, because it's legally done in many other towns, Cape Wide.
Maybe it's not legally done.
Unless it's challenged, and then they'll win.
The issue was people moving into Bourne or another town, depending on what the scholar set was. So they wanted to have you figure it out 6 months in advance so you don't jump on the bandwagon. So someone brought up the state court and the state lost, so the residency requirement got nixed. The day you come into town and establish residency is the day you get your license. So unless that's been overturned in the courts, then that should still be standing.
But the town of Albany did get it in court when we had, you can get it within a certain amount of time, we were challenged in court by that. So that was legal. Like when we went down to the 4 months, we got to acquire a commercial license.
Right.
Actually, Wealthy was challenged in court and we won that.
Was that the Donald Stewart Ross thing? Yeah, it was. That was Ross, that's it, but yeah.
They left us both.
So Nancy, where do you think we should go with this?
I think we should put it into the definition of resident, and what I would add is just domicile will be established after demonstrating 6 months of residency in Albany.
Does anyone have any questions or comments on that? Michael?
It'd be wise to go to town council and get the true meaning of the law instead of just putting it on the books. And ask our town council what to do on it.
So I'll send it to town council
That's what you
before
do.
we bring it to the selectmen.
That's what you do.
Helen?
Yes, my advice always is to go to the DMF's council, because in my experience, although town council is good, the council that knows the most about shellfishing is the DMF's council, and they will do that to us before we do a reg.
There may also be two different opinions on what the definition of domicile residency is with regard to our town council and DMF. So I would get DMF's opinion on what they consider domicile residency to be.
Dan?
If we're gonna make it 6 months, why don't we just go for a year? That's what it is in Chatham, I'm pretty sure, a year.
Yeah, I would rather see it be a year.
Nancy said originally wanted to see it be here, I think.
It just because that's what a lot of other towns have, Chatham, East Hampton.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't
Yeah, let's not forget, DMF's council and DMF okays all our regulations before they come to the select board, or after they come to the select board. And our domicile, definition of domicile, which this committee worked on for so long that I feel cross-eyed remembering it, was carefully vetted by the DMF. Right?
No, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I think I did it with all the other regulations.
Yeah.
6 months, I think, is perfectly legitimate. And we shouldn't be afraid to do shellfish in it either. Because our numbers have been going down, right?
They're good.
So why don't we create a law to keep, make it go down more?
I'd rather have less people coming to town to get their
Yeah,
license.
6 months, like, nice, you know, they're not getting just a half-year rental, they're getting a 2-year out rental. If you're 4 months.
I'm just saying, don't be afraid of new shellfish. That's all I'm saying.
I agree. So we're not going off on that one, Nancy, till you get legal counsel?
Yeah, do you want it to establish 1 year or 6 months, so I know what to send them?
How does the rest of the board feel, or 1 year or 6 months, does?
I do agree.
I do.
Here,
All those in favor, I'll like to make a motion that we'll have Nancy check into the legality of making them a domicile resident requirement of a year for a commercial shellfish permit in the town of Wellfleet. Anyone else like to second that motion? Pardon? You- All those in favor of a year?
Yeah.
Right?
So is it
Oh, you'll be
is legal? Would you just this is gonna have to come back to us anyway. So if anyone feels strongly about it being less than a year, we can probably gonna have another discussion about it.
Pardon?
Was somebody with that?
Something back?
I was just going to point out that in Dennis, we have a year. And also, I'm a resident of Situate, Mass. My family has a farm in Dennis, but I'm trying to start up an aquaculture program in Situate. So we have an advisory board that we started about 4 months ago. So we've been looking at everyone's regs, and it's pretty standard. And I mean, I think it would probably hold up legally as well. And by domicile, proof of, garaging your vehicle or voter, registration. There's any number of ways that can happen, but I think it's a good thing to have in place to protect, especially if the Cutler bill, gains support, then it would be one measure that would prevent corporations from swooping in and taking up farms, that kind of thing. So I think it has a number of different positive effects.
Thank you for your input.
Sure.
Yes, sir. Are your name, please?
Dave Howe. I grew up in Chatham, and when the clam thing came about, and it was like in the Chronicle front page, the numbers went from 100 to 200 shellfish into 600, 700. We had people coming over the bridge, carpet baggers, everything, plenty of people, and some residents.
Hell, even I thought about doing a chat.
We had one. We even got one from Wellesley, even up there. So, migrations. I mean, if we have Chatham coming
I didn't
here.
know there was clams in Chatham. I didn't even know it. At the time, my wife said, all
Liar.
Okay.
But I mean, when it also comes to like face-offs, people will start to get their license 6 months in advance because they know that the face-offs are there, the contract. And whenever things go out of work, everything, Orleans just changed this to a year. We just had it done.
All right.
Okay, so to deal with that,
All right.
the second, sorry, just because I know we are running short on time. The second item is about Lieutenant Island South, which closes to all shellfishing from from June 1st to September 30th. Yes, so there have been some fishermen that have come to the Shellfish Department and requested to have clamming still be allowed down there. And it makes sense to us. We have to patrol that area anyway. So the idea would be to change regulation 6.4.7, South Lieutenant Island, to read South Lieutenant Island will be closed for the taking of oysters instead of shellfish from June 1st to September 30th. The exposure times down there are great. You can't even, get to South Lieutenant Island and it's already exposed. So I think closing it for oysters is still prudent, given our Vibrio concerns, but we don't have a problem with clamming, and love to hear people's feedback.
I think it's a great idea. Oysters sit out there in the sun for like 6-7 hours on a regular tide. and then even when the water comes in, it's super hot in there. But the clams grow great in there, they're all super healthy all summer.
Yes.
Last thing I did before they took my job away with the group down in East End is try to get steamer propagation tents going up. A friend of mine, DJ Crook from Barnesville, just has this tremendous set. He's coming up with 60 perfect 2.5-inch steamers per square foot. I'm not going to tell you where they are because, Donnie Santos might find out. That's huge density. And he's not using the tents, he's doing something different. And he's getting them to set on hard bottom, not hard bottom, but Barnesville bottom is different than out here. It's not soft sand. I mean, soft sand, you can get them. And they're all along the meadowbanks, in the grass, everywhere. I'm sure they're in well cleaned. I haven't really investigated, honestly. But these cameras got to go. And it's always nice to have another group to go if Armageddon comes on the oyster.
We had a great time with steamer nets for quite a while in the Gulf until the worms started marching in and then just went through and just destroyed us off. But if there's another method out there, I'd love to talk about
I
it.
mean, the plover police is another whole issue, but they all work together. I mean, the plovers love steamer seed. They live right, they nest on the water, right on behind highway, so they can eat the eggs and all the other stuff.
All right. So do we need to vote on that? I'd like to make a motion that we change 6.4.7, South-Lieutenant Island, rule proposed for the taking of oysters, let's strike the word shellfish, from June 1st through September 30th.
Second.
All those in favor?
So you have to now take this to the selectmen.
And then, did you get it on the agenda for their next meeting?
Yes, so let's just take one step backward, because I would want to do both of these rights at once to make the best use of the selectmen's time. I'm only gonna do one meeting a month from now on, because it's just been too shellfish heavy, and they need to have a concentrated, one time a month on the agenda. So, maybe you should do a vote that if town council and DMF council approves the addition of a one-year domicile, you as a board recommends that to the selectmen as well. And that way, I can bring them both, hopefully in 2 weeks. I can get on the, I think it's 11 or something like that.
I thought we did just.
So did you vote that?
Vote for 1 year.
Okay, so if I get a positive response from town council and DMF, I can bring it to the selectmen. Okay.
That's what I think.
Okay, yeah, great, just want to make sure. Thanks.
All right, so we're going to move on then. We have a letter of support that was sent by John Wayne for us to support the CONSCOM on the decision of the Blash House. Which you have, John, can you go?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think everybody got their electronic thing, they can get it out. So, very simple letter, Conservation Commission voted to deny a seawall, where we're all talking about the Blash House down on Pleasant Neck Road, 1440 Pleasant Neck Road. They wanted to go over that because their house is, over the dune there. And bottom line is, the Conservation Commission denied the comment. We just wrote a letter supporting that, saying we believe it should be denied too. And there's a lot of different people that wrote letters. The Park Service wrote 2 letters. There's a really detailed letter from, I think her name is Samantha Bieber. She's a geologist for the Park Service. And it was really detailed about the sand transport and the fact that these bulkheads end up falling apart, and the bolts and the hooks and the steel pins, they all end up going to the environment. They don't like it. Nobody likes it. There's people that like it, there's people that are property owners. So that's with that letter that got sent in. And I found out also that those letters were all comment letters regarding that were supposed to be in the 11th of this month. That got extended until July 1st, because a lot of people apparently were waiting on it. So if anybody wants to write a comment letter, one way or the other, you have till July 1st to get in. It's the Executive Environmental Affairs Office. Box 900 in Boston, so we get the
Melanie, would you comment on that?
Yeah, the stage we're at now is, and I was at the site visit with the people from the Massachusetts Environmental Protection Agency. And what we're calling for now is environmental review, right? There was a first stage where Select Board wrote in support of this denial of armoring the coast there, okay? The stage we're at now is we wanted to have a really great review from the state so that it stands up in court. The point is, the people who own that property are appealing it, are appealing Conscom's denial. And the Conscom has done a beautiful job on it. So it would probably stand up in court.
I just want to make another comment that this legal review is an end run by the owner to get a letter of understanding that there are no endangered species or fauna or flora on the property. It's kind of an end run around the appeal. But what Helen's saying is the legal review is actually now triggered an environmental review. So we're hopeful that this is all going to hold together and that the appeal by this owner will be, unsuccessful. Yeah.
I can also say that one of the arguments that I made on behalf of the Shellfish Advisory Board is, the income we get, Nancy provided some great stats about $6.8 million worth of shellfish landings last year, almost $80,000 worth of money for permits, for recreational and commercial permits. That's all jeopardized in that particular area if there's ever to be a breakthrough. And anybody who's ever seen an aerial photo of, the Jeremy Point all the way down to Pearl, it's like it's an unimpeded stretch of beach that you put a reduction right in the middle of it. I think most people would agree that it's not a good idea.
Yeah, for one more point. See, from Truro all the way to New Jersey Point, what we've had for years, and some of you were at the Mark Verbilli presentation about the way in which that shore is maintained, so you don't have breakthroughs. And if you do, they get healed up right away because it's one continuous bank of sand that gets licked up and down, healed again and again. Wait. So what we don't want is any armoring there which will change the erosion situation dramatically. And the healing that could happen with a washover, which we've had on the gut, wouldn't be properly achieved if you put something really rigid there right to the north of it. Just right to the north of it. And the town at one point removed a whole lot of big granite boulders for just that reason.
Oh, I was just wondering about sedimentation. Mike Borelli, what I was actually curious about, if he's looked at this. What Helen was referring to was about Old Herring River, and that was a presentation about that. But I was wondering if anyone's actually, any sedimentation experts have actually looked at it and reviewed the situation officially on the river and on the backside. Because what he was saying is that opening the Herring River is not going to cause sedimentation movement in any way in that area. But that was, he wasn't talking about wetlands and that. So I'm just wondering if there's been any study on that.
Yes. Short answer.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Chatham is right now in a lawsuit with the guy in front of the home. My experience, I mean, if you go into Chatham, there's 2 golf courses there, right away, and that whole golf course is a rock wall, and it creates erosion. It just washes out. The only option on anything is jetties. Jetties work. Rock wall out, it catches the sand. I mean, that's the only option. I give them an option. That's my only say, but I wouldn't, no. Just let make sure.
Right, John?
Yeah, just a quick comment on that is the jetties, the only thing about jetties is once you put one in.
I know, the whole place.
So you end up having to put them everywhere. But I mean, that's the thing, if this river was to go in, eventually it's gonna scour out around it, and you'll need to put new.
Electrolysis, like you got an 18-volt charge around here that takes lower units off of those. So like you said, all those pins will be gone in a year or two.
All right, so we're gonna move over, thank you for move on. Thank you, John, right, that's better. We're getting close to 10 o'clock now. And we're going to be listening to the folks that have traveled a long way to get here about Phil. So we're gonna do a quick, we were gonna do an overwintering discussion, first of two discussions, then.
Can I just backtrack for a minute?
Sure.
There's supposed to be another regulation discussed when we're talking about the rules and regs.
We wanted to discuss the dragging rules?
Correct.
Right, well, we were going to review the whole dragging section.
Yeah.
And bring it up at another meeting,
Okay.
when we had more time to actually address other concerns than just yours, so that we could do a dragger session, and really pull the dragger guys in, so we could hear from all of them and make it really public.
Good.
That, yeah, thank you. So that definitely needs to go down as a future topic. So we, along with the wintering discussion.
Maybe we should just do the mass application thing and then after, yeah, it seems like that's.
Well, they're the other two things we have, the overwintering and single-use plastic, which kind of go hand in hand, because we're talking about trash. Do we feel that we need to postpone that, and because it's such a big topic, and bring it up to at the next meeting, when we do the draggers and do overwintering, or
I
Nancy?
really think we need to talk about overwintering.
Okay.
We need to at least start a conversation, like we said, even if it's just right now, if I can capture some stuff here, people's thoughts. You know, our department has heard everything you can imagine about aquaculture gear in the winter. From taking it all off to having a memo of how much you leave on, but not, a certain percentage, to tagging nets. And I really want to hear from you all as we move forward with perhaps changing our rules. And it would be helpful, since we have people here, I value their opinions, and I really, even if we just capture ideas today, so that we can get started on this. Because if we end up changing the regs, people need time to prepare for whatever that change might be.
Okay, Nancy, so do you want to get up to the board?
So I brought this, I think that, we can start with no change to our regs. And then down here, it could be everything off.
I think it's sort of shameful what happened this winter was, I go out dragging and I'm hauling up shit every day, hanging down on racks, catching bags. It's dangerous. And it's really shameful.
No.
If you go for a walk on any beach, marsh, creek, anything on the bay, there's aquaculture crap everywhere, plastic everywhere.
How many overwinter contracts have handed out?
I can pull up. I don't know, I can tell you that there were, I can call it up. I should know, but I think it might have been 3,000 racks were left out.
No, how many people?
30.
How many violations?
I have it written down, so.
How many violations? Well, I believe you. How many violations are written out today?
There's,
For people who fail to follow the contract they signed?
there is ongoing development, and there's been nothing written yet.
So,
Because we have not yet finished our work.
So as of today, there have been no violations written. I've been in the mooring basin with dinghy, tying ropes to racks, because my clients and I pay the town of Wellfleet for mooring spaces. If we can't use that yet, because the racks are still there, and you haven't written anybody a citation for that. That's where the problem lies, folks. In my opinion, if people are big enough to sign a contract with the town of Wellfleet, and there's no enforcement to date for an area that the town re-rents, that's what they do in the mooring basin. They rent those spaces to the public. You cannot put a boat on top of a rack. When I look out in between my moorings that I install for myself and my customers, and I see the legs sticking out, last week, and I get in the dinghy, and I go out and it's not the point. It's when is this shit gonna end? You know, we can't have this stuff everywhere. There's no accountability, in my opinion, at this point, because if there was, a citation would have been issued. Just because we're negotiating, trying to get the stuff out of the mud is unacceptable. Yesterday, I believe somebody was out there putting more buoys on the stuff. It just keeps coming. I have another 150 moorings to put in. It should have been in on the 15th. I'm not putting the moorings in for liability reasons for people's boats to get holes in them. So because we have a few people who want to overwinter and don't clean up after themselves, and I don't expect them to be able to clean up after themselves when the ice comes.
No way.
Because we have no judgment on where this goes. We haven't had ice in a long time. We didn't have ice this year, in my opinion.
There was nothing.
So can I just interrupt for a second?
Sure.
Number one, I'd like to bring us back to solutions. Number
No,
two.
I think the board of selectmen
Alfred?
sitting
Can I
here.
finish, Alfred? So
I
number
haven't
two,
finished.
I would like to let you know that we're working on it, and I'm not going to discuss citations in public because it's between the department and the grant holders. So we're
Yeah, but it
doing our
affects
research
everybody.
and we're doing our documentation, which needs to be done before any citation is issued. Number
I-
three,
I-
I'm just going to focus on this. We get ice every year, and it's the roll of the dice, who gets hit. So I'd like to talk about solutions now. Proposals?
Everything off.
Everything
off.
That's the only way it's gonna work.
Everything
What
off.
do you what do
No
you mean by
questions
everything?
asked.
Do you mean clam nets? Do you mean racks?
Not clam nets, but any metal.
No
No
change.
change.
I'll even take my clam nets off.
There you
I'll
go.
second that, I'll take my clam nets off too. These fucking guys have to clean up after their shit. And if you're gonna leave it out there, you're gonna leave it out there.
You should
Nancy,
lose
I
your
know.
license.
But if you're gonna leave it out there, and it's gonna affect other people, you know what? We're supposed to be professionals. We look like a bunch of fucking pikers.
It's ignorant, arrogant, shameful, and disgraceful.
We need to watch our language because we're being taped, and so this can be here, we just have to try not to have it.
But my question is, if we sign a contract to do this, which I believe was a joke in the beginning, so I was hoping it was going to be enforced. We're sitting here today, in the middle of June now? Okay? I haven't put my moorings in the water, I've got boats everywhere, and I haven't set the people loose on you guys yet, which is coming next week. Because when they want to know why, it's because the racks are in their way. Now the public is going to actually be affected by this. Because I do not believe that a contract the town of Wellfleet issues should be let go. And that's what we've done with approximately 30 of these things. And I hate to say this, a majority of the people have paid attention. But no matter how long you pay attention, you can't keep track of the ice.
No.
There's been stuff down in Jeremy Point. I've been told this stuff even in the East End from Wellfleet. I haven't personally seen it. I can tell you what I've seen in my section of the world. The mooring basin is still full of crap. The Board of Selectmen need to step up and say, this is over with. Because we gave the fishermen the idea to use a contract, and once we violated it, either should lose their grant, or we should just do away with it, and then that's why. You know, we have a track record. It sucks.
Nate Davis was hauling up whole racks down in Eastham near the Target ship with 5 or 6 bags still on them. Zach Renner, out near my grant, you know. But like, he calls Zach, where's he? Montana. To hell. It's like ridiculous.
Kevin?
Did we, almost lose 2 people this past winter when a boat went over? Did we determine that that could have been because they were hung up on something?
Oh, it's not
I'm in
great.
favor-
hung up on
I'm in favor of taking everything out of the water. There are too many liability issues with regard to leaving it over winter.
It will solve a lot of problems.
So I'm.
Is there
we're selecting
anything in
it.
between,
Right.
because I heard this and this, but is there any sort of a compromise in between sweet, anybody would say, Brad?
Well, the issue I see is that you get so big that it's almost physically impossible to remove the stuff. So it kind of, if you're a smaller farm, you can deal with it, but if you get so big you can't, that's the issue. The issue is the size of your farm and being able to deal with it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah,
You can't
and
deal with
that's
it.
what's
You can't-
ruining the whole oyster market.
If
People
you
being
handle
too
your
greedy.
gear properly, then we may have lost 20 racks total, and we got them all back. And that's out of.
I just towed up one of your racks out on the west side the other day, so you didn't get them all back.
Johnny just saw us taking a huge pile of racks. This carefully handled gear doesn't get.
I just towed up one of yours on the west side the other day. It was yours, I know, clearly yours, like,
Well,
so you didn't get them all back.
return it then?
Huh?
We didn't.
Because it's not my job to take care of your gear.
Excuse me, we need to, like. you
Yeah, with
said
all due
earlier-
respect, I think this is gonna be a longer conversation, so maybe we can
If
deal
not,
with the
so-
mass.
Yeah.
And just to comment on what you're saying, I think we discussed this a long time ago about solutions to it, and really, the only solution we came up is pumping the racks down. Now that hasn't seemed to work with everybody, so now the discussion is really, do we keep the racks, you know, allowing people being able
In
to pump them
violations,
down?
like Alfred was saying, if people don't get their racks.
Or do we make everybody take everything off? I think that's the discussion we have to have, but I feel like it's gonna take a really
Yeah, unless
long
there's
time.
some sort of an intermediary solution that we could write down here just for us to think about over the next month and then bring this back up in July.
High enough fees that we can hire somebody to go out and pull people's stuff if it's not, for each rack that is found with your name on it that's not on your grant, a $300 fee for every rack?
Barbara, that's not
The
gonna work.
tagline? I
That's
don't
not
know,
gonna work.
money,
It's
they
not
just
gonna
pay for
work.
their
It's
best.
a deal by the pocket, it can work.
It's money. And if
Oh,
they
boy.
start finding them,
Never
we're threatening to take away the shellfish lease. If they're gonna use their farm, we're gonna be careful with their gear.
bias.
Or we can run regulations. It works in order to take anything away. I apologize. I apologize.
They can be bonded if they're gonna keep their shellfish out there, or the racks out there. Have a bond.
I believe I have the largest army of people when it comes to a grant.
I agree.
I don't believe what I see out there, my army could take care of.
No.
If we go there, my army could take care of what I should have left out there.
Okay, so I just went, right now, I'm just
And I
gonna
have
take
an army that can take
five
care of stuff.
more suggestions for compromises. Justin.
I just want to add that we've been working the Inner Harbor all since March. Very low tide, our barge is way back in the very back. And we get in, we have to wait to get up there. And we try to sneak in at low tide as we can. We haven't hit one bag or I haven't seen any.
I've seen bags, I haven't seen any.
I haven't seen one rat. I've seen tons of bags.
So
And I
solutions, Mike?
believe that they're out there if they've been pulling them up. But we go in there as low water as you can possibly go. And we haven't hit one thing since March. We're out there every single day.
Did you have a
What
solution?
about fee to overwinter stuff along with that contract?
A boat coming down on a plastic bag isn't gonna hurt a boat. In the mud. Gets pushed down in the
Maybe,
mud.
you know, racks seem to be the issue, you know? So, I don't know. Most people seem to be able to overwinter bags on their bottom and then leave on the bottom, put it down. But I don't think there's a perfect solution, except for.
Yeah, but there are too many people who lost control of their gear, what they think they could have done differently in terms of finding solutions. I don't know where, is it size, and I'm sure anyone wants to overwinter, would like to do it again, so how would they solve it? What happens?
What would we use?
But nobody's here to talk about it, who's it, the Dolphins, huh? Oh, the Dolphins, what are they?
We didn't lose much this year.
But
We
you
like
are
lost, we lost everything in the winter time, we're jumping down on the rack. We're pushing them down, we're doing what we're supposed to do, we're following the rules. And if the rules are changed like that, nothing, then that would put us out of business. I mean, the reason we can sell oysters March 1st, when the ice clears, is because they're out there, and that's what we take advantage of, because no one else has, which is all guys that are pulling everything off and have these minuscule little oysters.
What have they done historically for hundreds of years? You take them off in the winter, so.
We've had it red out there since 1995, and we've left racks out there every year.
Yep.
That's why it's everywhere now.
We had ice for less than a week this year. It's been an unmitigated disaster. Whether you lost 20 racks, that black eye doesn't go away, folks. Okay? And these racks, you know, I walked around the highway, they're sticking up. You know, it's only a matter of time before somebody gets hit.
Poor little kid falls on one and gets impaled. Great.
And so, like I'm saying, you know, we got to do something. We got to do something. And it's not the extreme case, and it's not nothing. But we got to do something rather than sign a piece of paper and, you know, see where that goes.
Sorry, but no amount of pumping racks down is going to stop them from getting dug up. Like.
Yeah, we need to just go up the real quick.
There are certain areas where having an overwintering agreement is just like totally absurd. Like where I am, like I could sign a contract, there's no way I can make it through a winter without taking all my gear off. Every single bag comes off, except for a few that are on the ground, outside.
That's the right way to do it, and you handle your business fine.
So like I shouldn't even be able to sign an overwintering contract where I am. So I don't know if elevation or water depth is playing a role in this.
That's why this needs to be a topic for a whole conversation. And I'm gonna admit, I saw some pretty ugly clam runs down in your neck of the woods. And some pretty nasty looking rerotted. There were many flattened tires, like clam gear. So it's not just oyster gear. There was a day where one gentleman got 3 flat tires from exposed clam gear that he didn't know was there, but of course it got washed. You know, so we all have to be conscious, whether we're clam farmers or oyster farmers, and we need to have a big meeting.
So what I would like to do is, I would like to hear from 2 advisory board members, and then we're just gonna close it. So Zach and Dave, I want to hear what you guys have to say.
Right, that 8 inches coming down now, the enforcement of that, that's a big deal, and then you consider it a little I know once ours are way down.
How do we stop?
Dave?
I would say that because we're supposed to tag our gear, we're adding more single-use plastic just by adding a tag. There's no point in, since nothing's happening, we all know whose gear is out there. Add a set like a monetary ticket to being like, oh, here's some gear. James Sailor's on there. Like something that enforce it, you know, like $100, $200, something just ridiculous that makes you feel you're doing.
So is that a monetary fine for found racks?
Yeah, or tax.
And a deadline to remove stuff that's found. Like really.
Strict, real strict.
Okay, hold on, I just need 1 second. So the only thing I did here was that you can't have any, this is some feedback I heard from the flats, no commercial activity until you clean up all your gear. So you can't go fishing, you can't go to market until you get all your gear cleaned up.
No selling.
That's, should I put that down or not? That's
Sure. They're finding stuff while they're dragging, so it's impossible to clean it up unless we buy a dragger and went out there and we could scare them.
It sounds like being responsible. We'll clean up the mess.
Sure.
Farm rec procedure question.
Yes.
As the Marine Advisory Committee, the harbor master, has been asking these questions since he also falls into all the jurisdictions that crap all over the place.
I honestly don't know.
Don't you think that that would be a huge part of this discussion? To let them know ahead of time so that they could have a Marine bring it on their agenda for Marina Advisory.
Is there anyone here for Marina Advisory?
Point of interest.
Okay, so,
All right.
How would you say insurance on it? And you have another agency, another individual helping us understand probably the problem. The insurance industry said, well, this is getting way too expensive, and way too challenging for us. They'll stop the winter pricing on insurance.
but do people get insurance?
You can't get insurance for a year. Not for, you can't even get it, they won't even cover you. Even regular insurance liability.
Just to see,
You can't get insurance on the grant?
not the racks.
Not on here. Not on
Just
here.
on the,
Not on the You're not even really on them, but they call it.
Yes.
To be continued. Yeah, we really need to get moving on here. So, what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of rearrange the room a little bit. Scott, I'm gonna ask you, there's been a debate on how to pronounce your last name. I've always called you Scott Soares. Some people are adding Soares.
Yeah, Soares is correct.
Soares is correct, okay? Just so we all know who we're talking about. It's Scott Soares, it's pretty simple. And Seth Garfield are they here? And we're gonna talk about the coupler bill is what we've been calling it and how it would affect home rule. So Shellfish Advisory is gonna kind of move our tables out of the way. We've set up the stand here for a little presentation, and then how do you guys feel about how we should set up for this part of the meeting? Should we just move Shellfish Advisory to one side?
Sure, because
Table?
if that's the screen, we'll
That's the
project
screen right here.
Just move it out.
To
this side.
All right, so we're all here to talk about this, what we're calling the coupler bill. And,
I'm sorry, I'm gonna be very careful. Hold on to it.
how we could make this work for all of us, and if that is possibly possible. So first, I'm just gonna let Seth and Scott do their thing, and then we'll be opened up for comments and confrontations or whatever comes down.
Turn the AC on a little bit.
Anyway, my name is Seth Garfield. I run an oyster farm on Cuttyhunt Island. I've been in the oyster business for 38 years. I use off-bottom nets, lantern nets, so I don't have some of the issues that you have, obviously that was just discussed a few minutes ago. I want to thank the management trustees or the advisory board for having us. We do have several members here. I know Bob Wallace is here, Andrew Cummings, Jared is here, Les, and Dale Levitt. Those are some of the members on our board of trustees. And we are the Massachusetts Aquaculture Association. And we're thrilled to be here. Just quickly, our association, I actually helped start this back in 1986 at UMass Dartmouth, back when wastering was not necessarily a big financial part of the equation. I think you're all well aware that there's $28 million worth of oysters that are grown in the Commonwealth, and between, I think it's Yorktown, Barnstable, and up in Plymouth, that's the top 3 producers for aquaculture oysters in Massachusetts. So it's an important part of the equation, and now that the association is moving forward as an organization, we're a nonprofit, but we represent more and more of the fishermen because it's getting more and more complicated, even discussing the rules and regulations right now that you're talking about locally. There's lots of rules and regulations at the state and federal level that are getting more complicated. Therefore, the association is taking a more active role. Just quickly, some of them nonprofit, and then I will go right to the goals that represent the interests of Massachusetts aquatic farmers, both the clam farmers and the oyster farmers. We are obviously after everybody promoting a good, high-quality product. The thriving aquaculture industry. If it's at $28 million, you start doing a multiplying effect. Even times 2, we're talking over $50 million of revenue in the state, in the towns, in our local economy. And support and develop the transfer of relevant technology. We have a great group down in Barnstable County, previously led by Diane Murphy, who's doing research that's associated to our industry. Many of us who were on in our committee, we sat there and listened to rules and regulations that were dictated to us through the federal government on decisions made in Alabama 7 years ago. And we can't have that. We need to have local industry-related research done in our backyard, and then maintain an effective network between industry, government, and researchers. And that's primarily one of the reasons we're here today, because some of the rules that we're looking at, and this has been coming out of discussions not just in the last week or two, but over the years, of how we can maintain and make sure that aquaculture, the way that it's written in our Mass General laws, is carried forward. And then we believe, just because organizations do this, that aquaculture industry, the local state governments, including your advisory board, your board of selectmen that regulate your grants here, that we need to have a common voice and we need to move forward. So Scott's going to sit down and explain the current status of the bill right now. That, again, it's in, if you know how this works, bills don't happen overnight. They take a long, long time, and this is part of the public input, which is ever so important in regards to making sure that we get it right or have to change it to make sure it's working for everybody. So Scott, if you take over the rest, and thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thanks, Seth. Just one last word on the association. For anybody who wants to know more about the Aquaculture Association, we do have a brand new webpage up and running now. I would encourage you all to take a look at it. Some of you may have seen a webpage that's out there that unfortunately is a counterfeit. Somebody grabbed an old URL and started to populate it with a bunch of information. So anybody who reads that webpage, you'll notice there's some inconsistencies with that page. This is the accurate one, massaquaculture.org. Follow that URL and you'll be able to get more information about the association, accurate information. I also have some one-pagers here about the association if anybody wants to take any of those with you. So, without any further ado, let me jump into House Bill 746, Act relative to shellfish aquaculture licenses. Before I get into the reasons why and what it does, you all need to know on a timing perspective, we were at the beginning of a 2-year legislative cycle. I'm sure some of you have heard this. Bills, if they're going to move forward, then they have to be introduced typically at the beginning of that 2-year legislative cycle. This came up back before the year started, back in 2000, the tail end of 2017, and the association trustees had a meeting and talked about legislative issues, legislative priorities. The language that's presented and proposed in this bill, House Bill 746, that was originally docket number 1109, that was, as was mentioned, filed on the Aquaculture Association's behalf by Representative Cutler, includes language that came out of that meeting. In large part, to really get a conversation going about some long-standing issues, and I can speak from experience, the issues that are brought up in this around transferability are long-standing issues. My history with the Aquaculture Association and the aquaculture industry in this state goes back to the early 90s. When I was the state's first aquaculture program coordinator for the Commonwealth. And even back then, I think at that point when Bob Wallace was here with us as a member of the association, was then president, this was an issue that was coming up way back then, so well over 20 years ago. So really, those conversations have continued. So at this point, because of the growth, obviously you all know better than most communities, the impact that aquaculture has on local communities, with the revenue that's generated, the number of licenses, I think you're at around 260 plus licensed growers here in Wellfleet, the most of any town in the Commonwealth. And licensed areas about acreage, you're well over 70 acres that's being used right now for aquaculture. And again, many of you likely already know all of that. But you also know the issues that have come up as your previous discussions to this have already talked about. Opportunity to seek changes that benefit Mass shellfish farmers as well as the communities. What you all need to recognize, and as Seth mentioned, when it comes down to legislation process, it's often referred to as a sausage-making process. All kinds of stuff goes into the hopper. Something needs to be proposed, though, to start that conversation. So the hope was that this bill, 746, would start the conversation to also come back to municipalities like Wellfleet to ask what other things might you like to see changed in state law that have been on the books for maybe 50 years in some cases, that need to be changed because you all know, again, better than most, the aquaculture industry in this state is very different than it was even 20 years ago. I mean, now with shellfish aquaculture, specifically oyster landings, ranking 3rd in value. And that's amongst all landed seafood in Massachusetts, behind sea scallop and behind lobster. That's just farmed oysters now at 27 million plus. That is significant. That makes the aquaculture industry a significant player here in Massachusetts and gives the aquaculture industry, including all of its members, all of the growers out there, the ability to implement changes in regulation and in statute that can benefit you. It also has to be done, though, and recognized, coming back to the mission statement of the Aquaculture Association, that we have to do this in concert with the communities. And I'm going to get down to the details of what the bill specifically proposes, and that this is not an attempt to usurp any home rule authority. It's an attempt to actually benefit communities that host aquaculture, as well as the businesses that have grown over the time the industry has grown. And again, it's an attempt to bring quality, consistency, and some certainty to shellfish farming businesses in Massachusetts. The ability to go to banks to get loans like any other business does. The ability to transfer that and get a return on the investment for a grower like Seth, like many of you in this room that have invested multiple decades into your business is critical, like any business. You want to get a return on that investment. The only way to get at that is to better legitimize the business. We heard comments in your previous discussion that ultimately cleaning up here, which, by the way, I agree, is a way to legitimize the business and legitimize that aquaculture and shellfish aquaculture in the state is a legitimate business that needs to be recognized as such. That's what this bill is exactly trying to get at. Better legitimizing the industry here in the state after so many years of being underway. And again, the Wellfleet has been such a leader in that place. So why House Bill 746? Current law identifies shellfish license transfer as voluntary by the issuer of those licenses. That's the towns. This is not an issue for Wellfleet. Wellfleet issues, does transfers. You've done it for decades. You transfer these licenses, but it's not true for every community here in Massachusetts. So all of your brethren, shellfish growers out there in other communities, in some cases, they're looking at a terminus to their license, a terminus to their business, because they are hearing that there's no ability to transfer those licenses. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Why don't they deal with that through their own municipalities?
And they're not our brethren.
That's a good question.
Because
That's a
at
good
first
question,
you
but
could
they're not.
transfer them in Wellfleet.
But they're not. Let me answer your question. They're not, and as the Aquaculture Association that represents growers across the Commonwealth, we've been asked, and the trustees have pursued, that incidentally the list that I have here will show you who the trustees are, who they represent, that this is an issue that needs to be resolved by law because it's not being taken care of by all the towns.
These guys are my competition from another place. These town is my brother. These guys are not.
Point taken. That's the answer to your question, though. That's why. So it's not being done. It's not being done. That's the answer to your question.
But that shouldn't be, so you're asking the state, okay?
Let me get through the presentation.
All right.
Scott, briefly,
Get to the point.
if my town can opt out of this bill, I might even go for it. Okay, but I would like to see my town be able to opt out of this bill.
I'm going to get to that, Richard. Let me get to specifically how it will impact Wellfleet or any other town for that matter. Excluding, so this is the whys. Again, excluding transfer to immediate family upon the death. And this is from the statute. The only way that it can automatically be transferred in any town is if somebody dies and then you can transfer it to the immediate family of that person who passed away. And it's only for a year. It's in state statute. It's in state statute. It's different from each town. Wellfleet, this is not an issue. Again, this is not an issue in Wellfleet. It's not an issue in Wellfleet. It's not an issue in some towns, but it is an issue in other towns. And again, this is why the Aquaculture Association, representing all of the growers, has come back with some consistency, some continuity for all growers, so they can be treated as fairly as growers in this very town are treated.
You don't represent all growers, you represent your trustees.
We represent our membership. We represent our membership.
How many members do you guys have?
Current transfer limitations and terms imposed by towns vary widely. Although the statute says up to 15 years for renewal, most towns do not allow the 15-year renewal. And what the legislation will do is take away that 15-year term, because it already says up to 10 years, it's a different place within the statute, and it leaves it open-ended so the towns, through their own regulations, can identify the terms that they want in their own towns. So it's an artificial line at 15 years for the term. It's, to the best of my knowledge, never been triggered.
Scott, we can have a regulation that is more stringent than the state, and the DMF has approved our 2-year, 5-year, 10-year cycles for renewal. So that's not an issue.
You're right. It's not an issue in Wellfleet.
Why are you wasting our time?
I'm here wasting your time because all we've heard for complaints around this is from Wellfleet.
Right.
That's
We're hearing complaints from Wellfleet, which tells us.
We don't want to get stuck with this.
Which tells us, which is why we're going through the legislation. Which is why we're going through the legislation, so we can show you that it doesn't have any impact on what's happening here in Wellfleet.
You're not going to stop growing pain, Scott. We've had ours.
So what is,
your other towns are going to have theirs. And we're not a square hole to fit in a round peg.
That's why you gotta deliberately let us
Let
have
him
the
finish. Let him finish, and then you finish your presentation. So what the bill does propose, this is specific language, and I'm going to get into, I'm going to show you in context where the language is proposed, how that changes the law, how it proposes to change the law. It requires that shellfish aquaculture licenses be transferred. It requires they be transferred. As I mentioned already, it's optional at this point by law. That's not true in every town. It doesn't affect growers here in Wellfleet. But the fact is, the way the law is currently written, you may transfer aquaculture licenses. You may transfer. That means you don't have to transfer.
Yes.
And in some towns in this Commonwealth, that is what's being exercised. That they are in fact not transferring or giving any opportunity to the growers in those towns that they want to transfer license. So again, this will not affect Wellfleet. This will not affect Wellfleet. Required transfer of shellfish aquaculture license to be done by the holder of the license. This is different. Right now, if you remember what I said, the way the current law is written, it requires that the transfer be done by the issuer of the license, so by the towns. The towns are the only ones that can issue that license. That's like saying to any other business that you cannot identify who you want to transfer your license to. That ultimately you're going to leave it to a regulatory authority, to a regulatory body, a municipality, to transfer that license to who they choose to transfer it to. That's what the law says. Again, that's not the case in every town. It certainly hasn't been the case in Wellfleet. Because ultimately there is a good relationship, a long history between the growers, the municipality, and the way the licenses have been transferred. It's not an issue here in Wellfleet.
How many people does the MAA represent?
I'm going to finish the presentation.
I'm
I'm going to finish the presentation if you don't mind.
I do.
Thank you. Removes the maximum 15 years for license term renewals. I already mentioned what that does. It's an artificial time limit that's put into legislation. It doesn't need to be there. It doesn't remove term limits, but it removes the time associated. Because the reality is, and as Helen already mentioned, the term limits for each town vary, and they've been set by the towns, depending on who they want to transfer it to and when. It varies from town to town. All this does is remove the 15 years, so that's not an issue really for any town at this point. What it does not do, and these are 3 bullets that I'm throwing up because these are the things that I've heard, and I know members of the association have heard repeatedly of what the perception is of what this bill does. It does not take away town approval authority for the issuance of shellfish aquaculture licenses. There is still, in the law, based on what's proposed for the language, an approval authority of the municipalities that is required before the license can be transferred. So even if the grower says, I want to transfer it to that guy, because I have confidence that he's going to continue the hard work that I've done for 25, 30, or 40 years of my license area, and he's worked with me and I want to transfer it to him or her, then I can do that. I can do that based on this change. The way it stands now, it has to go back through the process and the town has to give the blessing. In most towns, again in Wellfleet, the town does give the blessing, but not in all towns. So there's no consistency from town to town. Does not require the towns to issue shellfish aquaculture licenses to anyone other than to whom it might have originally been granted a license. So, though again, the way the language is written, the proposed language, It allows that the licenses would be transferred by the grower to whom they identify with approval of the town, but only to somebody who may have originally been approved to get that license area. So the questions that have come up around privatizing the resource, having a Coca-Cola come in and lease out the bay, that in my, and excuse the word, but it's in lesser word than I've heard already this morning, but it's a lot of bunk. It's a lot of bunk. It's fictitious. It's fictitious. Because it comes down to the approval authority of the community, only a transfer to somebody who it may have already transferred to at the beginning. And that's what the language is proposed, specifically in the language. And when you get to the specific language of the law in just a minute. And it does not establish an open-ended or legislatively defined license term. That comes back to that 15 years. So it opens it up, that renewals can be established for a term, but it doesn't define the specific length of the term. It leaves that up to the towns as well. So again, it gives the towns more in this regard to do the transfers and to do those transfers and renewals for a term that the town wants to choose, like most towns do now anyway. So I don't expect you to read this, okay? I don't expect you to read this. But what this is, on the left-hand side, your left-hand side, section 57, chapter 130, that's all the language in section 57. The only change to section 57 of 130 that's being proposed, and it's an important one, is a change from a may to a shall. And then there are some other changes here in 58 that I'm going to blow up now so you can get a better look at what that looks like. These are the only changes that are proposed. And again, keep in mind what I said, this is a sausage-making process. These are priorities that the Aquaculture Association has said, we'd like to see changes. But ultimately, we need to talk to the towns, we need to talk to other growers, we need to make sure that if they want to see changes here, like I heard the earlier discussion around gear removal, around identifying gear, having gear tagged, which is not the case in every community, although I know it is here in Wellfleet. I know it's important here in Wellfleet. So that if gear drifts in from across the bay or from somewhere else in the Commonwealth, you ought to know whose responsibility it is. It's not required by every town. That would be a nice thing for you all to consider in this legislation. That could require every town to require tagging of all their gear. It would get at that very issue we were just talking about this morning. So again, it changes that, again, I've already mentioned, said this is a specific statutory language, not regulation, it's statute. Said shellfish aquaculture license shall be transferred pursuant to section 58. So all that says is look to section 58 for the transferability. Transfer was already allowed by law, but it was a may. You may transfer. That doesn't mean that they have to transfer it. And as I mentioned, in some cases, towns have it, and they're not supporting it. It's not an issue here in Wellfleet.
By putting these words in, you're making it so a corporation can come in and sue the town by saying, shall.
Let me finish.
Bullshit.
Let me finish.
Could you, I want to ask you something, Scott, just for a second. So when we're saying you want to change it to shall from may, are you finding that towns are taking leases away and not using them for aquaculture because it says may? In other words, are we losing shellfish licensed areas because it says may instead of shall? Is that what's happening?
In some cases, that is what's happening.
So the licenses are being taken out of.
I don't know the specific numbers, but this is what we've heard from membership. Again, this has been proposed by the association because it is an issue for some of our members. And that's why this legislation has been proposed. Again, it is not an issue for Wellfleet. It's not an issue for Wellfleet. Because you already allow these transfers. You already do the transfers. You're already treating it as a shall. But you know what? That could change tomorrow. That could change in a year. That could change whenever there's a political shift in a community that does not like to see transfers. It does not like to see those things. Because the way the law is set up now, it's a may. There's no requirement to have that transfer. And all this is doing is saying, no, you have to transfer these licenses.
I'm just trying to understand.
And it's, again, it's recognizing that in most cases, and hopefully, again, it's a great example of this. I'll get to you in a minute, Jane. Is a great example of this is that you have some growers that have been growing shellfish for longer than I've been alive. Longer than most of us have been alive in this room. We have businesses that have been out there for a long time. You're giving them some certainty that it shall be. Fortunately, Wellfleet is one of those communities, and why the industry has done as well as it has here in Wellfleet, is because you have historically acknowledged that. But again, that isn't true for every town. And this is a way to get at some consistency for the entire industry here in Massachusetts.
You keep mentioning how like Wellfleet is doing it and doing it and doing it. Why doesn't the rest of the state just do it how we do it instead of trying to?
That's what this is trying to do.
No,
Because
exactly.
they're only gonna do it if law
Exactly the way we
changes.
do it.
Because they're only gonna do it if law changes it. And if you get to the transfer, if you get to the transfer itself, this is where the most language inserts, it's highlighted here. Instead of may be transferred, that's struck, shall be transferred by the licensee by sale, gift, or bequest with the approval of the city council or selectmen to any person or entity. And I know this has been a catchword for a lot of people, coming back to what you were saying, that some have interpreted that as corporations. To any, but you have to continue reading this, to whom it may have originally been granted and whether or not so transferred. So it's to only those who it would have originally. So it comes back to the town. It comes back to the only way that a corporation is going to get out there and lease out an abatement for Shellfish aquaculture is if the town selectmen say, yeah, go for it. I doubt that's going to happen in Wellfleet. I doubt that's going to happen.
It could happen.
I doubt that's going to happen in any other town.
Yeah, I think you want it. I think people want it.
I doubt it's going to happen in any other town because, like you all are so passionate about what you have here in Wellfleet, other towns are the same way. We are a home rule state.
So I'm going to
We are a
take
home
your
rule
word
state.
for it.
This is not usurping local authority.
Excuse me, it is. The Commonwealth is a home rule state, and what this does is it takes away the option for other municipalities to do what they need to do. And why doesn't the NNA do outreach with them and say, you guys have to get yourself together. You know, here are some examples in Wellfleet or wherever. You can make it better. So the shall, my hair stood on end when I saw that. Because what you are doing is telling a municipality in a home rule state how to do this. Liquor licenses, you can't sell liquor licenses like this.
They want to be able to
Hold
sell
on,
their
let me
grants,
finish.
but
Let
they
me
don't think it's
finish.
enough that they
Let
can
me finish.
capitalize on.
All right, listen.
Wait.
All right, listen.
Hold on, I need
No.
to finish.
Raise our hands and be spoken to.
Yes.
All right? The Shellfish Advisory Board's going to go first, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. All right?
May I finish, Barbara?
Helen.
Yes, entity I have no problem with. If you're a corporation, you're considered an entity. That's fine, okay? We have entities here in town. What I really didn't like was the supposition that you shouldn't have 15 years in there. I think 15 years is an outside envelope that is very lenient, and that actually, having been in this process now going into my 9th year on the Shellfish Regulatory Board, you really need to look at somebody ringing up. It doesn't need to be loosey-goosey. It could be less than 15 years, but the state should step in and say, hey, 15 years, you guys need a review. Who are you now? So I liked that being left in. I did not like the state telling any municipality, never mind Wellfleet, how they have licenses bestowed or transferred. Okay? That's just
I'll
not
just respond to that and I'll continue the presentation. It's not telling municipalities how, it's telling them that they shall transfer. That's an important distinction because it still comes back to however the municipality and to whomever the municipality wants to transfer it to. Because the municipality has the approval authority. You're shaking your head, Helen, it says it right here in state law. It says it right there. In state law, it shall only be granted to someone who may have been granted to in the first place. And that's granted by the license issuer, which is the town. The law is, the proposed language is not changing that.
Yes, it is.
It is not, show me where it's changing that.
I can show you.
Show me where it's changing that legislation.
Okay, as soon as you put shall in there,
Yep.
then by right you can sell that to anyone.
No, you can't.
Yes, you can, because
You can't, because it is saying shall be, read the rest of that sentence.
Shall be
Read that
transferred.
sentence to me.
Shall be transferred pursuant to section 58, all rights and privileges enjoyed by the licensee. So anyone that the town,
Now read section 58, because the law brings it back to section 58.
sure, sure, this is the problem, okay?
Go ahead.
Is that, say I want to sell my license, and I sell that license to Taylor Shellfish or something out west, and they're like, we want to buy your license.
Has the town given you approval? Was Taylor Shellfish originally one that could apply for it?
Well, all you have
You have a residency requirement in the town of Monmouth?
Sure, but all you have to do is comply with the town town bylaws, okay? So once a corporation comes, like Taylor Shellfish, and says, we are in compliance, we have a post office box, we've set up a corporate entity there, we're gonna buy that license, then it becomes arbitrary and capricious to deny them that license, okay? The town cannot arbitrarily deny someone a license because they don't like them. And if they set up multiple entities in a town, okay, they could buy up over the amount of the 7 acres which we have by law in this town as a bylaw. You can have a maximum of 7 acres. But if you have 3 or 4 sub-corporate entities, you could set those up in a town with a post office box and a corporate headquarters, and you would be able to, by right, buy those grants, because the town can't stop Dunkin' Donuts from coming here. You know, we tried. And we tried to stop Cumberland Farms from expanding. So these issues become, once it becomes to the regulators of the regulatory authority of the select board, they have to make a decision on whether they can transfer it or not. But all that person has to do is comply with residency requirements and the requirements set forth by that town. And we cannot arbitrarily and capriciously deny someone the transfer of that license. Okay? We cannot do it without being sued. And that's the problem. And that's why when you change may to shall, that shall means by right transfer. Okay? So may,
Again, put it in context. That shall, all that shall says is that any transfers shall be done according to this section.
Shall, by right.
Shall only be done by this section. That's what this law says.
Sure.
What the law says is, and what's being proposed is, rather than saying you may transfer it according to section 58,
right,
that's saying it shall be transferred.
So a municipality has to do it as long as they, right here, might originally have been granted.
Right.
But to become might originally have been granted is not a high bar to cross. Anyone can do that.
He's literally explaining to you.
Yes. That's the problem with the bill. That's why people are upset, because the thing is that you keep saying that it won't affect wealthy. Well, it totally affects wealthy, because the fact is that when you take that net.
The fact is, Tyler Shellfish
Hold on a
have
second.
hired me for him. Taylor Shellfish has hired me. Are you going to say that I don't have the experience, Nancy? No, you're not. You can't. Are you going to take me to court? No, you're not. None of you are. Because I will win hands down. That's what we're petrified of here, Sean. Scott.
So the problem really is that right now, we can't sell a license in Wellfleet. We cannot do it. It is not legally allowed. This would make it so we can. And we would have the right to do that. Now, in my opinion, we're operating on a public trust, basically. It's a public resource. We have access to a water. I'm an aquaculture license holder. I could make money if this passed through. My grant would essentially have value, but I don't own that bottom. Okay? And nobody out here does, except for maybe a few people. But that's beside the point. I cannot sell that, right? Because, and I shouldn't be able to, because I'm operating on a public trust. And that's the problem that I have with it. And when you change may to shall, you do take the authority away from the local body to determine, whether a license can be transferred.
Okay.
Right? Because we can't keep Dunkin' Donuts out of this town. We're not going to be able to keep Taylor Shellfish.
If you're here to talk about it,
Again,
have a dialogue, this is
Again,
it right here.
again, no, I appreciate this, because again, what this is trying to do is get at, for the shellfish growers themselves, some certainty that you can do, much like your marine wild fisheries brethren can do with their commercial fishing licenses, which
That
they
is not a good thing.
Which
That
they
is
can
not
sell.
what we want. So this is why I keep asking you, how many people do you represent? Your president's right there. How many people do you guys
We
represent?
represent anywhere from annually from 25 to 50% of the growers.
I'm saying, no, I'm asking
So
you
that's-
for a number. Just a number.
I'm not going to give you the number.
Why?
Join the association. I have applications here with me.
That's not like, that is not fair. Like that, it's like, dude, you represent.
Because it's like any other association. I represent the membership of that association. That's who I've been hired to work with. That's who
You've
I've
been
hired
hired
to
by
represent.
by everybody.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm asking, the reason why I keep asking you that question is because you're not representing. You're not representing. I don't think you're representing. We have more.
Again,
More.
I said, the question, what I said, because the question came up earlier, is I am representing, and we are representing the membership of the Aquaculture Association.
Not representing my best interests.
If you're not a member of the association, then you're absolutely right.
How many members do you have?
That's what I just asked her.
I mean,
At
it's
last count, we had, I believe, 69 members.
So you're representing
69 voting members out of 400 licensed growers in the state.
So you're trying to
between Wellfleet and Eastham, we have well over 100.
So that's great.
That are not
And this is
what
that's
we're
great.
presenting this morning.
And-
So when you come here and you try to tell us what's good for Off Cape, what's good for these other towns, and you try to sell it like you're representing 25 to 50% of all of the growers, then I have to do the numbers and get back to you. But we represent the two associations on the Outer Cape, which have only been in existence for 4 months, represent well more than you do.
And Jean,
I
I
know
think
that
it
they
is
are all
fantastic
opposed,
because
and they are
this
all
group-
opposed to this bill. So when you
growers
come
in
and
the
say you're
state
representing
need better representation,
mass,
which is
you really
why
are.
things are changing for the industry, why things have changed for the commercial fishing industry, why things are on the precipice of changing for the aquaculture industry in the state, because they don't have adequate representation.
You were hired
So
to
I
represent
applaud you
69
and the groups here at Wellfleet from coming together to do that. The Aquaculture Association is trying to do the same things.
for 69 people from different towns.
For the membership of the association,
that have a lot at stake, that they can make money and they need this to happen so they can make more money.
I agree.
Not my problem.
and this is why we're talking with you. Because concerns have come from Wellfleet, and the misperceptions, I have to say.
You're helping my competition. I don't, why would I want
I'm
that?
going to turn it over to the chair for questions.
You gotta be, Nancy, you've had your hand up for a long time, I'll try to keep my eye on it.
My question is, could you go over where this bill is now and the process? Has it been taken up by committee?
This bill has been filed with the joint committee, that's the Senate and House Committee, on agriculture, or environment, agriculture, and natural resources.
And has it been taken up by committee?
It is with that committee, it has not been heard.
It is not, so it hasn't made it onto the docket yet?
It has not been heard yet. I don't know if it's on the docket as of right this moment.
We're gonna do the
I don't
Shellfish
know.
advisory
I do
report
know it's been filed. and
first.
It's been referred to that committee
Right.
for a hearing eventually. When that hearing is scheduled, I do not know.
Okay, so has anything changed since when? So it was filed in January, and it was sent to that committee, and has anything changed since then?
The only thing that's changed is it's gotten a bill number. That's the only thing that's changed. It went from a docket number 1109
Okay?
to having a bill number, House Bill 746.
Okay, now that's because he's on the committee, and then Dustin.
Right.
Right, okay, good. So,
I'd like to go through the committee first, and then we open it up.
I'm the chair, so I'll make that decision right now. I may not be chair for long, but I am today. So Zach?
Scott, did you hear and understand what Mike was saying when he came up? Do you disagree with what he said?
I do disagree with that.
Can you explain that?
Yes,
How is he-
because it still comes down to the town's ability to approve that. And the town can approve that. It's a heck of a lot easier for towns to change bylaws, to change local regulations, than it is to change statute at the state level.
And how about what he brought up in that it's not a high bar to cross to be eligible according to the town bylaws?
Then it's up to the town to make it a bit of a higher bar.
Well, isn't that what we're doing already?
I don't know. I don't know what the town is doing on a
Back to the
regulatory.
towns anyway.
I don't know what the town is doing on a regulatory level. It sounds like you're on the precipice of doing some rewrite and change from the previous discussion this morning. That may be a part of that discussion to tighten it up. So you do have people that better respect the bay, that don't leave gear all over the place, that don't cause problems. Because the reality is somebody gets like the great white shark issues down here. Somebody gets eaten by a great white shark and gets killed by a great white shark. It's a problem for Massachusetts Bay. It's not just a problem for Wellfleet. The same is true for somebody, and from my experience on the ag side, the same was true for the dairy guys, and why there was so many debates around raw milk, as an example, that if somebody got sick or died from drinking raw milk, it became a problem for the entire dairy industry. Not just for the very few dairy folks who were producing raw milk. Like, similarly, will be the case on the shellfish aquaculture side. Like happened years ago with the diamondback tarpon issues down here. That one turtle gets trapped, and it's a problem for the entire industry. Somebody falls on rebar out in the bay, it's an issue for the entire industry.
So you don't think it would make it easier for an entity like the example he uses, to have a Shellfish to come in and do that?
I don't. Because the authority still comes back to the town. It is not usurping home rule authority.
Right.
It's not usurping the approval authority of the towns. It's not doing that.
Dave, because you're in the committee?
We're making, so before you were here, earlier on in the meeting, we were making reg changes because of concerns for this bill. I mean, there was a dude from Dennis here that was, like, made a recommendation, like, as a preference for this bill, because of this bill happening, so that we could make our regs more stringent, because 69 people want something for themselves. So,
That's great, that's bad.
no, it's not, you guys want it, no, you're making a problem for us.
Okay.
Mr. Curley's had his hand up for a long time.
So I'm gonna say something about a part that we're kind of overlooking a little here, is that by striking the 15-year term under the state regulations, so in towns or municipalities that do not have a defined term limit, they're essentially creating a perpetual license without a defined term and ever. And basically, once somebody or entity or whatever gets a right to that bottom, they can stay with them. And unless, I don't know, state laws change, maybe, but they might still be grandfathered in because it would be a pre-existing license.
I'll if I could address that. What it comes back to, again, is the approval authority and the conditions that have been established by the town. And they vary from town to town. Among those terms, like you have here at Wellfleet, are different terms depending on where the grower is coming onto the license, whether it's a 2-year or 10-year, and those have been approved. Most towns go up to 10 years. Very few, in fact, none to my knowledge, have actually approved up to 15. And I could be wrong about that, but most have not. And that's the only reason that 15 years was taken out. Because recognizing and acknowledging the fact that towns are already doing their own thing.
What
Towns are already
towns that do not have a defined term limit? There's a number of towns that right now are just starting to get their feet wet in the shellfishing industry.
Yep.
And, you know, a lot of them are starting basically fresh. And they have no defined term limits for a lot of these towns. So if somebody gets the right to that bottom under their license, they will hold that license in perpetuity, or whatever entities or other persons assume that license under the under the state regulations that require that license shall be transferred.
So,
like, and again, as I said, that was only put in there because most towns already, and there's maybe some exceptions, I'm not aware of any. I know Mattapoise is one of the newest ones out there. They too have term limits put into their licensing authority, but most, I'm not sure of any that have that, but I'd like to see it. Then ultimately, they would tune that up to put their own term limits into it.
And
if that's a deal breaker for Wellfleet or for anyone else for that matter, it's certainly not a deal breaker for the bill. Again, as I said, these things that were framed by the Aquaculture Association were framed by the members who wanted to see these changes made. But the bill can be much more comprehensive than that. So if there are important issues that need to be resolved in any number of towns, including Wellfleet, as one of the preeminent aquaculture towns in the state, behind Barnstable and Duxbury, then you can actually make those changes, propose those changes. We're here because we want to work with the towns to make this work. That's the only way this is going to work in Massachusetts.
What happens when it extends out past the municipality-controlled waters into the state waters?
It becomes federal. There's no regulations around it at this point on the federal side. You have to get federal permits.
It's different between federal and state.
They're very different. Outside of 3 miles, it's very different. That's why there's been legislation actually proposed at the federal level to try to get at some kinds of regulations that will help, primarily around aquatic kelp, aquatic sea greens, and aquatic vegetables. But nothing, to my knowledge, has been moved. Save years ago, they were trying to do tuna net pens off of Provincetown. That hasn't moved anywhere. Because there's no structure outside of 3 miles.
There is currently the Aqua Act that was proposed.
That's been proposed by Wickers, and it's not going anywhere. It's strongly opposed by environmental lobbies out in D.C. It's not going anywhere. But like this bill, it was supposed to get a conversation started because we know collectively, as people who work in the shellfish industry and aquaculture generally, that there's a lot of investment being lost to other countries.
You just said that it wasn't, that currently there was nothing being discussed about it at the federal level.
That's not what I said. What I said is that the bill that was filed, and it is the aqua bill by Senator Whitman.
Discussion.
That's not what I said. I said there's a bill that was filed by Whitman.
So, okay, I'm trying to see whose hand was up first. I think it was Helen, and then we'll go right down the line with the rest of the selectmen.
So I feel if the Mass Aquaculture Association wants to help with this, do outreach to the communities that are just starting up.
Yeah.
Do a little work. We are pretty far along here. And this is about land use. Every environmental situation, every shell fishery, every fishery is very, very site specific, even within our harbor, okay? Which is why you should never tell us how to manage it. And I disagree
I have
with
to
you.
stop you when you go that far, 'cause we are not telling you how to, we are not telling you how to manage it.
I completely agree with what Michael DeVasto said. And we have chosen to have the farming that goes on here not be something that happens in any way by remote management. There are reasons for that. One is communities are more responsible to each other when they're farming next to each other. Okay? If you have a boss that's remote, this happened in the Midwest with dairy farming and, crop farming. If you have a remote person who's calling the shots, even if they have somebody domiciled to meet with our regulations, those decisions are not going to be properly made within the community in meetings by a local regulatory board. And I don't think land use should ever happen like that. And we have a very good tradition here in Massachusetts where local land use decisions made by Conservation Commission, CBA, all Board of Health, water commissioners are all, we get to do our own regulations and we get to make decisions about this. This essentially does take away our right to say somebody in a completely different place gets to make decisions about what happens. The loophole is too big, and my opinion, after carefully considering this, because I like change, is I think the bill should be pulled. And I think that you should do, I'm being imperative here, you have a mission to help people that want to have a shellfish industry to understand better how to do it. You could do educational outreach, and that would really help make it more consistent so people would be more responsible. Don't impose it, on the whole Commonwealth because of land use specificity.
Christina? Hi, I'm on the Wellfleet Select Board. I want to agree with what Helen just said about home rule and pulling the bill. Although you're here to listen to us, the bill's already been filed. So I don't feel that anything that's said today is going to make a difference. And we're the largest shellfishing community in the state, so it's just not common sense to have a bill that has this many legitimate concerns. I just feel today you're here to present and try to sell to us, and then you'll leave and nothing will change. And that doesn't make any sense to me, and it was like Trump's tax returns. You didn't want to say how many members you have. We have more members than your aquaculture association, so the two groups need to talk to each other. You can't just go write a bill that your association thinks is good. Go file it, come to us, we have objections. That was nice, see ya. It's not gonna work out.
With due respect, the Wellfleet Commercial Fishermen's Association did not exist before this was all done. It's a new association, as Judy
Our
said.
Shellfish Advisory Board did all our shellfishing.
There are trustees and long-standing growers here in Wellfleet that were part of the discussion around getting this conversation started for this bill. And ultimately, the way the legislative process works is you file something first, And then you have discussions, because it starts the conversation like we're having now over what things can be changed to make it more palatable, so that the aquaculture industry and those who have been behind this, so the members of the association, want to see change, can see that change, but at the same time, they can be benefit to the communities that host shellfish aquaculture. Because we recognize, the Aquaculture Association, that the only way aquaculture will work, shellfish aquaculture, or even near shore within 3 miles, marine vegetable aquaculture will work in Massachusetts, is if there's strong partnerships, communication with the towns, and the growers work with those towns. And that's why we're here. We came to you to have this
Is
conversation.
anything said today going to make a difference?
Yeah, that's what
Are you going to change anything?
I haven't heard any constructive changes to this, other than keeping the 15 years in there.
Well, we have a problem with home rule. You might not just agree with us, but it's a legitimate concern. The concerns raised by Mike DeBosco about what would change Wellfleet's ability to regulate our own industry, you may not agree with them, but they're legitimate. And I have a third concern, because a sale of a public bottom, a public resource, a bottom, is a huge change to the industry, and everybody knows it benefits the larger commercial interest. And that's a huge 4-letter word, that sale. And I don't think you should open up changing the whole industry without listening to the largest shellfish producing community.
Okay. So let me reply.
One thing.
One thing.
There's like, in Wellfleet, if you're a person that's had troubles, whether it be through like drinking or doing drugs or mental illness, right? And you don't have a lot of money, you can get a shellfish grant and you can turn your life around, right? So the little guy wins here in Wellfleet. They need what? $25 to pay their grant fee to start business? Now, I wanted to say one more thing. To these grant owners who are off Cape here, the public trust has given these grants freely at a nominal fee to you to use. How should this, how is there any integrity in you making money and it being made individual property?
So if you've been growing your business for like 30 years and you decide you want to get out, you have,
you've made money.
You shouldn't be able
You've
to.
made
You've
actually made too much money for your own damn good, all right? And now here you are trying to change all the rules so you squeeze out the little guy. I haven't heard one thing in here about a wild shellfishman. I've been digging wild shellfish for 40 years, okay?
You guys go to your SAP, you talk your town rules.
But can we let other people with a different point of view just at least be heard? For the fun of it?
Nah.
Yeah.
You know, because, it's good to just let people be heard. Could you explain who you guys are and why you think this bill is necessary?
Okay, I can explain. My name's Les. We're in Barnstable. I started my grant 26 years ago. I worked really hard. Recently, my kids have come into the business, quit their jobs, and they're working with me, and they're doing a dang good job. They're working their butts off. But when I want to transfer my grant to them, if one guy on the select board says, no, I don't want to, they're out of everything. They lose everything. We have no right to continue business. If one selectman, and we have a couple of those in our town, says no, we lose everything.
So the easier thing to do is to pay the MAA to speak for you instead of fighting your own battle.
I'm here, right? I'm here. I'm not afraid to speak.
I think
I've been with
I think people in your situation, like I know people in Orleans have the same problem, and I feel for them. I get it, but what you guys need to do is not include the entire state to make things easier for your business. I think you guys need to make an association. You guys need to get your groups together. You guys need to get your people together, and not pay a director who is on every single thing, who's got his hands in everything, to speak for you. Because this is something that, our community, we can do it. If we can do it, you can do it, you know what I mean? And I tell that to people in Pleasant Bay, and they are trying to do it, you know? And there's nobody here that wants you to not pass it on to your kid.
That's my whole thing. I want to pass it on to my kids.
Yeah.
And the way it stands right now, maybe I can, maybe I can.
As the third largest producer, as Scott said, you know, oyster farming is huge. You should be able to bring this case to your town and be like, listen, look at what we're doing. We're employing all these people. We're making money for our town. We're keeping jobs here. We're cleaning all the stuff that comes with farming. You shall use.
But that, again, I'm gonna come back to it. After more than 20 years of these issues coming on, but if you don't think that's happened, that they've gone to towns trying to change things before going to step to legislation, then you're only paying attention to what's happening here in Wellesley. The reality is it has. I'd also like to come back to what the select board person said on the changes to this taking home authority. If we were able, it's a question. If we are able, I'm not an attorney. I've worked with a lot of attorneys over the course of my career. But if we were able to get an attorney, legal opinion from an attorney that says this does nothing to change the authority of the communities to issue it to whomever they want to issue it to provide that approval, would that satisfy the concerns that you hear? Because I'm not sure. Are you an attorney? I'm not an attorney. Have any attorneys in the room who have reviewed this legislation have a legal opinion they can write with?
Do you have one?
Hold on, I'm not an attorney.
We hire them. We go to the Conservation Law Foundation, Legal Food Hub, provides pro bono
Hold on a minute. I'm not an attorney, but I've been involved in situations that resemble this because I'm on the select board.
Like
So
that.
here's the thing. Unfortunately, us using KP Law to take things to court is very expensive. And the select board does it selectively. But there are limits. Cumberland Farms was over $90,000, okay? So we do not want to put ourselves in a situation where we are contesting something, even though we still have the authority. We make a decision, we say, no, this person does not meet our criteria, and therefore they can't have it, and then they take us to court. Something was said earlier, there is a way in which a select board, regulatory board, or a council in Barnstable can take you off your grant. And that is if you're not compliant, if you're in violation. They can take your grant away. Otherwise, that's the reason I wanted to leave the 15 years in there, because there's got to be some point of review. And we have it happen much more quickly than that. I also have to say, here in Wellfleet, I don't get it. People who are children of people who are named to grants get to be on your grants all the time. They qualify. And as we know, if you want to get out of the business, you can sell your business, you can sell your equipment, you can sell what's growing out, and you can get money for that, right? And your children can be transferred onto it before you die. So it's completely passable, honorable if they qualify, which they have to do anyway. That's why I say pull the bill. It's good enough the way it is.
For Wellfleet.
No, for everybody.
Change their rules.
Just 1 minute. Stephen had his, I'm just going to do it down the line here real quick for a quick comment. Stephen, you and your letter from had it for a long time.
Don't town feather me everywhere in the room, but I am a member of the board member of the, I mean, the biggest thing is, they're a bunch of bullshit because people from Wellfleet did not get emails sent out to us when this was all going on. I never got my email, I got it after the fact.
And that's what we told at our Wellfleet Shellfish Association from members, is that this all happened not through the rest of the group, and then you guys got blindsided by it.
Yeah.
Michael?
You left us out. They left us out. They did not email us, but
Even
even
the
from
NAA,
Wellfleet
members of the
made it
NAA
a
got
point
blindsided.
Mike,
to drop us.
I just want to go back to the very core of what I had talked about before, and the loophole that's created by changing may to shall, okay? And I know that you don't agree with it, but I'd like to know what types of local regulations, because we have pretty stringent local regulations in place right now. The bar is pretty much as high as we can make it here to get an agricultural license. This would override that, because the shall means by right. You know what I mean? So when you want to sell, you know, your publicly granted access to the bottom, okay, to whoever you want, I don't see any way that that we could prevent consolidation. Not that the intent is to consolidate. I don't think that's true. But the loophole and the loophole that would allow for and give us no real way to prevent a consolidation in our industry where we have, you know, on the Cape, we average 2.4 acres per grower on the whole Cape, right? So it's a price-sensitive industry. So if we have a company with the means to consolidate licenses, and there's a huge loophole in the law, and maybe you don't see it, but it's glaringly obvious to me, you know, because once you have a by right to sell, even the bar, you can't set the bar much higher than we have it in Wellfleet to get an aquaculture license. You know, I mean, I don't see how we can prevent that type of thing from happening if this goes forward. It's just like what happened in the scallop industry. It's just like what happened in the lobster boat industry, where all of a sudden your trap permits worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can sell your shitty boat for like, you know, whatever, and people are pushed down. The small guy gets pushed out of the industry because once these things go through, and it's like I can sell to the highest bidder, you know, and all they have to do is conform to local regulations before I do it. There's a huge loophole that's created, and that's the problem with it. I mean, the only way out of this is to change shall back to may. And that's my suggestion, because may means that you can. And so Wellfleet, there used to be one person per grant, you could not transfer it. Right, Barb? In the past, that's how it was. And we evolved, and it took the town evolving, because we are from this industry that dates back to the 1700s. The first aquaculture licenses were granted. There was actually a huge consolidation that already happened in this town by seal ship. It was the biggest grower. All the people who were picking the bottom back in those days were wiped out by a big corporation. They took the whole thing. They started bringing oysters up from the Chesapeake Bay, dropped them all over the bottom, okay, because there was no regs about grant transfers or whatever. They just owned the bottom. That's what they did. Basically destroyed everyone turned into wage workers that was out there picking the bottom. And I don't see how this doesn't open the door to that in the future. And I don't want to wind up like the scallop industry. I like that this is boutique small farming. And this changing may to shall opens the door.
Yeah.
And there's no way around it. Once you open that door, there's no way around it.
I'm going to go in order here. Seth, and then Becca, and then over here. Okay,
Helen, getting back to your comment about an hour ago, you had mentioned that this town has gone through a lot of evolution in regards to changing your rules and regulations. All right, that's because, and you can change your rules and regulations at the local level. In order to do anything at the state, it takes obviously a long time. The Mass General laws have not been looked at significantly for decades. And this is one of the things that we're looking at. We're hoping that over time, we'll get more feedback like we are today. We will do, and you folks are significantly farther ahead than places like Mattapoisett, Fairhaven that might have one or two growers. The fact that you have to go, you mentioned, Helen, to the Division of Marine Fisheries, right? Talking to Mike Hickey and the people up there to make sure that your rules and regulations coincide and are supported by the Mass General laws. And you've mentioned several times that you have your bar pretty high in regards to residency requirements and all of that. And you have a mechanism out of curiosity, do you have a waiting list for people who want shellfish grants?
No.
In the town? Is that because there's a moratorium on it?
No, it's because it's a constantly shifting membership of people who want them. We have a very good lottery system.
Okay, so, but that's developed over time, right? Because of the need, because of the demand here. There are other towns that are just learning this, and maybe they should come down and talk to your shellfish warden, and things like that. And again, it's all part of best management practices. The Dale Levitt's group has worked on a booklet on best management practices on how to run a good business, and one of the things we've talked about in the last several years is putting an amendment on gear and the lost gear, especially down here. And I know 2 winters ago, you had a tremendous, terrible year with those 3 storms in March, which was not good for anybody. But the point is that discussions like this are healthy. Yes, they're painful, but and we can listen. You can listen to us. Technically, there is a method to the madness. It is so complicated, and all of you know about good old Vibrio, right? How much fun that is, okay? That just didn't precipitate down, all right, from the FDA through the ISSC, et cetera, to the state, all right? Our organization has been working for a long, long time to make sure that things are fair and equitable for communities in Massachusetts, not for somebody in some other state. So, yes, I'm promoting the Mass Agriculture Association. We can be the good guys because we do all this work that you all really probably don't know about because of all of these rules and regulations that come down from the top federal government, all right? And we're sitting here looking at this as a potential issue down the road that could alleviate certain situations for the future in regards to grant transfer. That's the only thing that we're really addressing here. We would love to hear other ideas about issues that are out there, whether it's here because you have so many shellfish leaseholders, I think, what do we say, 261 or something like that, and you know, we need to work together, right? Just like you were talking about the brethren, right? You don't care about people in other towns, you all work together here. It sounds like there's also a little discourse between the draggers and the shellfish farmers because of the gear, but that's being worked out, all right? That's up to this committee to listen, that's up to the selectmen to listen, and it's painful, but we're gonna get there. And I appreciate your energy here, all right? The terrible thing, and apparently there's no lawyers in the group, but all of this comes down to when something has to go to court. You just mentioned $90,000 because you were arm wrestling with Cumberland Farms. Lawyers are going to pick that word apart either way, whether it's may or shall, depending on who's been impacted by that.
No.
Shall.
Shall, they will pick a court.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you.
Becca, wanted to comment on something?
I think there's something with the person here who was talking about Barnstable. So if it's changed to shall, what happens if your kids want the grant and somebody else who fits the requirements want the grant? Shall doesn't change anything. It's still town rule, right? So how does that change what the town wants to do? If they don't want to give it to your kids, they'll find a way not to.
Because it comes back to, again, on the language, the first shall is referring to section 58. The section 58 shall leaves it up to the grower, the license holder, to transfer that to whom they want.
Okay.
So there's two different parts to that. Now again, the first shall only says, that shall says, you shall transfer, but only in accordance with this section of law. And this section of law 58 says how that transfer will be executed with approval of the license issuer, with approval of the town. So again, and again, this is why I offer to have, what's that?
So the town could still say
The
no.
town can still say no. But at least in this case, you can identify who that person is, and if that person's in line with who made it originally. So in Les's case, as an example, if Jared and Aaron, his sons, the character is the same person as Les was in that town, resident of Barnstable, they meet all the criteria that they could have originally gotten a license from the town, then they would be those that fit into that category of somebody who would have been issued to in the first place. But in this case, it's less saying, I want to issue it to my own boys. Rather than in some towns, it's a waiting list, or it's a lottery, or it's a variant. It doesn't come back to that business grower, or that business individual grower, who's invested in some cases multiple decades in that business. And then being able to identify who they want to see their business transferred to.
What happens when Jared and his other son, and they transfer it to their kids, and they transfer it to their kids, and then eventually one of those kids just hates oyster, and they don't want to do it anymore. Then they transfer it to Taylor Shellfish, or whatever, it doesn't matter. I don't know, Taylor, you know, whatever. Like they transfer it to Cumberland Farms or whatever, and then in perpetuity, it just went from Hamilla Sea Farms to whatever, you know, because they're not going to get rid of it. Well,
Okay, now, this gentleman here, I forget your name, I'm so quick. Dave had his hand up the last time.
I'd like to remind everybody in this room about recent history. Your presentation is very similar to what the Hook Association used to spiel out year after year. And now we know that the fishing industry is devastated by this. Okay, Chatham's pretty much closed shop. You guys, I can see that you're already affiliated with that group. And it's basically large corporation, large grants, trying to take over and manipulate the wording of the bill for their advantage. It's taking out all power of small fishermen. Small fishermen, that's the backbone of all the community. Every single one of these small groups of shellfishermen, they bring into the economy, they bring jobs, okay? You take away the fishermen, and what you're doing right now is you're just completely trying to just not even give us any word. You didn't even give us a warning about MSI, and now your group is going to take over what we've been doing our whole life? No, that's not right. Your association, stay over the bridge. You can work that side of the bridge or deal with the farmers. We don't need your words here. We don't. We need to be represented by ourselves. Okay? That's what we're saying to you right now. Your presentation, we don't want the shell. I mean, get it to your heads. We don't want shell. Thank you.
You have a comment here?
I just think sale is the dangerous word on that, not really shall. Like, because wealthy, you can't sell your license, right? So
No.
I think sale is a way more dangerous word than that. So
Well, it's the world. Pfizer will come in
Like
and take
they
over.
said.
Well, shall is by right to transfer to, so basically if it says may, that means the town has jurisdiction whether you can transfer or not.
Yeah.
So it should, what my point of contention is here is that towns we should not be asking the state government to dictate to towns what they can and cannot do in regards to transfer of licenses that they allow and issue as part of the public trust, as a public resource, you know? And I have an agriculture grant, I would benefit financially if this bill went through, because I could say, hey, I'm tired of this, because sometimes my back hurts. And who wants to buy? Who's the highest bidder? Okay, come meet my local regulations to become a whatever, hire this agent, hire this guy. I don't care what you want to do. As long as you get someone down here and open a P.O. box, I'm going to sell you my grant if you're going to pay the most. Okay? And then the value of these things goes up to the point where the bar is raised so high that there is no more family farming. Like it's happened in all sectors of agriculture too. I mean, but the difference is when you own land, on land, you own that land. We're talking about land that you don't own, that you are given the right to use for a nominal fee. And for us to monetize that, I don't believe it's right. You know what I mean? I think, hey, like the way Wellfleet works, and I'm just going to give a brief explanation of how we do things here, is you can have multiple people on your site, okay? You can't sell them your license, but, you know, I think, what is it, 3, Barb?
4. Yeah.
So 4 people can be listed on a site, right?
With they're all equal.
They're all equals on the site. In order to get someone off the site, they would have to go before the select board and get removed from that site. The whole situation, if you want to sell your business to someone, it's all a matter of like sort of trust and you have to trust the person going in, and they have to trust you, because if you say, hey, you know, let's work together, you know, we can put your name on my grant, whatever, you're a domiciled resident, and I trust you, okay, and we're equals on that grant now, okay. Now I'm going to get out. I'm going to sell you all my gear and equipment. I can't sell you the license. You're already on there. But the whole process is, the only reason it works is because of the community trust in that agreement. So it's like every town should have the right to determine how they do these things. Like in Falmouth, they just allowed a sale from Atlantic Aquaculture LLC or whatever to Dave Ryan's business, I forget, Cape Cod Oyster. It was like pretty large sale. That town just decided they were going to allow that, you know? And I just don't think, I don't want the state telling me as a select board member that I have to allow it. Because there's no real way to stop people from being able to meet the town's regulations. But because of the way things are, you can't consolidate here. You just can't.
We have jobs, we have an industry that works, we have the most shellfish revenue of any town in the state. Just from a business standpoint, I don't know why our voice shouldn't count. And I know you're listening to us, but our vote should be seen. And if we don't approve of this bill as a community, we're going to have to oppose it. So I would think that you would want some agreement here. We have just as much right to go to our state reps as you do.
Absolutely.
And to open a dialogue.
That's why we're here.
You're here, hearing very valid input and just kind of like stonewalling. Why can't you?
How am I stonewalling?
Why don't you take Shell?
What I'm saying is,
Why
I've
don't you-
heard remove shall, I've heard remove the 15, leave the 15 years in there.
Can you take
That's
the
what I
Shell
heard.
out?
Can you go back and get a vote?
Sure, that can be proposed
Yes,
as a part of it.
I
I don't know, I'd have to bring that back to the association.
Yeah, and
I'll
then
talk to
like,
the association to see if that eliminates the language for the
Right.
bill, but it's part of the dialogue we're having now. That's
All
why
right.
we're here.
Good, so I wanted to know if you would, I know you're here listening, but I wanted to know if there'd be an action item that our community's
Well,
concerned.
like you as a select board member cannot make a decision for the town right now, I can make a decision for the association,
I
but it's
understand.
something I can bring back as a result of coming here.
Yeah, I understand that. I just wanted to know if there's a process to take.
There is a process,
And
we're
then
engaged in it right now.
The second comment that I think bears mentioning is what Mike DeVasto said and this gentleman said about sale. We have an industry that works here, that provides jobs for young people, and everyone in community in Massachusetts wants to retain young families. When you change it to sale, you disrupt the economic equation. That is working. So I think that that really is a sticking point, at least for me. As a select board member, I know that some of our young people get out there and get a job. They don't have to have $50,000 to $100,000 to buy a license. Right now, they're priced out of the housing market. Now they're going to be priced out. Our number one source of jobs in industry and wealth. So this is desperately important to this community, and I hope we can create action items out of this meeting.
Yeah.
On the
And
word
please,
sale.
we'll leave
The
the general
shop-
contact information with Barbara.
Right.
We'd love to collect that. And again, per our being here, we're trying to collect that input so we can bring it back and make things work. And quite honestly, we were surprised to hear as much outcry that we heard from the town of Wellfleet, because again, as I mentioned throughout, and I'm not just throwing smoke, we didn't see this as changing anything for Wellfleet because of what you already do and how you do it.
Yeah, but on
And
the
that's why,
state
again,
level-
it was an issue why we were concerned to hear back from Wellfleet as a preeminent aquaculture community that this was a concern because it doesn't change anything.
But on the state level, it'll end up changing. The entity will sue the towns, we can't fight it. They're bigger pockets than us. The little guy gets pushed out, big guy moves in, we're screwed.
How are you screwed here in Wellfleet?
If this passes with the shall and the sale.
I don't see how
Like, that's why we're
Because
opposed.
it's easy to get the requirements to meet the
You're gonna
town's
consolidate.
things. It's so easy, that's what he's been saying.
You've been saying
So
it.
this is how you pass that.
We're trying to explain it to you.
That's the town requirement is so easy to meet. So that's why this is all coming, and for some reason you're not grasping it.
This is not broke. Don't fix it.
On the state
Wellfleet, you're
No,
right.
no, and help other communities get to a better place. Don't make it mandatory.
Go to the communities of
Nancy
concern.
had her hand up for a long
So
time.
I want to speak as a constable and encourage you to speak with other constables from other towns, because we're all concerned about may to shall, because, yeah, you're not taking away the authority for approval, but it is taking public bottom out of the public domain. And that wasn't the intention of Mass General Law. Mass General Law set this up because it's public bottom, as has been said. And Wellfleet thought this was so important that it just purchased 250 acres of intertidal bottom to the tune of $2 million, thanks to a $1 million donation and town voter approval of another $1 million, because that was privately owned, and it could have been sold to whomever. And it was so important to the town to keep that in the public domain that we put our money where our mouth is. And I think moving forward, this bill is going exactly counter because it is taking bottom out of the public domain. I understand, Les, you would like to be able to pass it on. I don't see why any town wouldn't want you to do
Neither
that.
did I. But this is what can happen when you get a
You have a
select.
select board, but it has
Right,
to be
they
a
can
vote.
vote
Not
no.
one person can't change it. It has to be,
Right.
a majority, and you can appeal. And, there is a way. Frankly, a lot of towns have looked at Wellfleet's 4 people on a grant and said no. Because what happens in Wellfleet, the truth is that there are a lot of transfers that happen that the Board of Selectmen approve, but it never comes back to the town to administer, let's say, to the next generation, right? We don't have a lot of grants being given back to the town. That is the intent of Mass General Law. And other towns have looked at Wellfleet and decided, we want these grants to be able to come back, and that there is an organized distribution and way of affording the next generation access. So it's important. This would change and would take it out of the public domain. Okay, approval, sure. But if you meet, you can't deny. So we need this to remain as the intent of Mass General Law was that this is a public domain.
We could go to the town, all these people, we could go to the town.
I was just wanting to say that I hope Mr. Hemla and his family keep that grant for as long as any of them live. Okay. We didn't always have a board of selectmen that was behind our backs. We went a period of many years where we couldn't do anything here. They would not pass any grants. There was no new grants, and the Board of Selectmen we had here said absolutely not. They put their foot down, and there was 10, maybe 15 years. And then finally, we got some selectmen in there that were, Michael, was open to our plight, and things started to turn the other way. I'm just saying, it takes a long time, and in this town, I feel that I'm lucky every day I get up, because I got the town at my back. Really. And if it wasn't always like that, it may not always be like that. But this is not the answer. And you come in here, you said, what can we do to make this go? It's the shout. It's the shout. A lot of us don't have, I know for myself, I see very short term. Scott, I know you're a long-term guy. So you know what you're looking at, and you know what you want to get. Aim for nothing, and you'll surely get it. You're not aiming for nothing. I'm just saying, if you want the town of Wellfleet behind you, that shall has got to go. It's got to go. And that's the one thing.
Just for clarification, which shall are we talking about?
Both of them. Both shalls.
Get rid of the bill.
The bill's gotta go.
I don't see where, is if this bill goes through, you're not not gonna be sunny days forever. This bill's gonna go through, and it's gonna just open up another can of worms. Another can of worms that everybody's gonna be fighting.
What else you got hidden?
You know, when Jerry Moles retired, he called me up. And I said, Jerry, you know, you've been great. Thank you for all your help. And he says, Richard, you know, things are not always going to be like this. And they're changing in a hurry, and the change is coming on now. And he says, I don't necessarily agree with it. But, you know, I think every town is going to have to fight their own fight. Making us sign up to this, you know, I don't think it's ever going to work. I'm never going to get behind it. And I know that the people that I represent on the good days here in Wellfleet, the Wellfleet Shellfishermen, that none of them are going to get behind it. And I'm going to keep harassing, you know, my local legislator every time she buys bread. So, you know, she's getting sick of seeing me, but she hears me every single time. So, you got your work cut out for you. Dump the bill.
I think if the MAA has problems with this or needs this bill, they should start coming to Wellfleet as a model and asking us to go to their towns, like our SAB. I would go to the Less's town and be like, listen, this is like what we do, and I could stand up and be like, listen, this is how we have to do it. The Shellfishermen's Association could do that for these guys, and you know, but this isn't the way to do it. You know, if you know what I mean, that's I would do that. So you guys could do that too. Yeah.
I see a hand in the back of the room.
I'm just wondering what other towns that you're selecting to go to push this through. Are you going to Barnstable, or have you been to Barnstable?
No, I haven't.
What about Massapois that you mentioned? What about the other towns that are growing? Fairhaven? So where else are you going to try and get this done?
This is the first place we've been to. I haven't talked to the other towns or anywhere else.
What about Topside?
This is the first town I've gone to. I haven't talked to anyone else.
And have you hand selected, did you personally invite people to come to this meeting?
Trustees.
And who are they?
The trustees, there's actually, I have a handout here, you can have a copy of this that has the trustees. The trustees that are here today with us are Les and Jared Himmler, Dale Levitt, Seth Garfield, and here's a list of all the other trustees. And I'm still looking for that document from you two on the MSI stuff.
We had a couple of
I just want to say something. We didn't come here to push this down your throat. That wasn't the objective of this meeting. Trust me. We came in here to show you something we were looking at and get your opinion. And quite honestly, I don't like the way Scott's been treated today. And it's like he's a bad guy. He's paid to do a job, sure, but we're not trying.
Dan, will you stop being rude, please?
We came in for your opinion. We didn't come here to be treated like crap.
I'm sorry if you felt you were being, but this
I mean,
is the way
everybody's been
around.
good to me. I don't think they've been good to
Scott,
That's
right.
okay.
Dan, you had something to say. Ben, is that you?
Yeah, I have a question. If you're saying that you're coming here for our opinion on it, shouldn't we have been shown it before it got pushed through and actually opened up as a bill and a document? Shouldn't we have been able to weigh in on it before it started to go through the whole process?
Sometimes legislation happens that way, most times it doesn't. Most times it happens with a thought, an idea that's filed, and then there are discussions like these to help make changes. As I mentioned, the sausage-making analogy is when it's often used when it comes down to making legislation and changing legislation. So this is a part of that sausage-making process.
So are you able to go in and change this right now with anything that we suggested?
Yeah, absolutely. It comes back to the association. This is something we have a trustees meeting on the 19th. You can be sure that this is on our agenda already to have this discussion. To have the discussion with them about all the concerns that are out there.
And one of the reasons that we are here is because we have heard of the concerns of this community. So we decided to come here to make sure the folks that are need to be informed or want to hear us and can talk to us directly, can have that opportunity. That's what communication is all about.
Thank you.
And we're hearing you, all right? We, as Scott just said, we have a trustees meeting. We happen to be sponsoring this bill, so we went to our legislators after meeting, and this didn't happen overnight. This has been going on for 3 or 4 or 5 months. We did have to file a deadline, because if we didn't file the deadline and get the docket number assigned to us, we would have had to wait a whole other year. We're doing our homework, and it's all part of the process. And if some of you haven't been part of that process, other than at the local level, it's very time consuming, and you have to go see lots of different people, because not just one person is voting up in Boston. You have to get other legislators to support these bills, and there's a lot of homework that needs to be done, a lot of educating. So this is part of the process, and again, we appreciate your input. We've heard you loud and clear, sir, without a doubt. You know, I know that you have probably other things on your agenda. The day has probably dragged on a tad longer than people thought. And, I don't know if you, Barbara, want to answer one more question over there?
I just wanted to ask, before this was submitted, did you guys hire an attorney to look at the language, or who wrote the actual language, I guess is what I'm wondering, and was there an attorney involved in drafting this and the possible implications that it would have, or is this just sort of like sort of light bulb in the head, kind of, we're going to put this out there? I mean, what went into this, and what kind of legal sort of guidance did you have in drafting a law that would affect the largest, one of the largest aquaculture industries in North America, really, Massachusetts? I'm just wondering.
Like most legislation, there was no legal review before this was filed. It's not
Like
it's not
most
law,
legislation?
it's a law.
That's correct.
Like most legislation.
I'm following 10 different bills for a bunch of different organizations, and this is how all of them start. Somebody in a trade organization puts together stuff, they submit it, and then you have 2 years to figure out whether it's horrible and you need to cut it out, or whether it can be worked with. And some of them are cut out immediately, because people go to town meetings like this and say, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard, and let me show you why. And then people say, oh, you're right, we don't need this, and they get rid of it. Or they say, let's adapt something, and because the idea is generally good, let's fix it. But that's how these discussions go, all over the state, in all of the different bills. And he's right, most of them don't have a lawyer involved.
And beyond that, what often happens is these bills, when they're filed, they often become vehicles for other legislative change that wasn't even a part of the original bill. It becomes a part, and this is why, again, I came back to, these are the priorities, that things that were identified by the Aquaculture Association trustees, and was pitched out so that ultimately when we start to work with the towns and other members of the community at large, that any other changes that might be implemented in Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 130, even beyond Sections 57 and 58, could be considered as a part of this bill. And again, it comes back to the fact that, as I mentioned, right now, third most valuable landed seafood species in Massachusetts are farmed oysters. The industry has juice. And the industry can use that juice to make legislative change that helps. If this stuff doesn't help, I can guarantee you the association members themselves are going to say, well, it's not the right time to move forward. They're not going to want to jam something down when it's been a history of partnership and community to make this thing work, to make things go. In some cases, like Les has already defined, they've tried repeatedly, in other towns as well, to try to get things to change that will help them give some certainty to their business and move forward. It hasn't worked. That's why these things are pulled. That's why these things are developed, to help you get at a fix that otherwise may not be achievable. And again, it's not true here lawfully. You guys have done it well. That's not why this has been proposed, to fix things in Wellfleet. This has been proposed to fix things in other places because the other places aren't fixing those things.
I think we're pointing out some economic effects, though. The things said about fishing licenses in the past really needs to be heard, because it really did devastate the industry. And I understand that growers, like some of your trustees, in catch your name, have very legitimate business concerns, but we have to be careful about solving them in a way that opens up the door to worse problems. And overfishing, it's a supply and demand commodity, everybody knows that. There's not infinite demand for oysters, they're all eaten in restaurants, some over 90%. And if you want to watch opening the door to too many larger scale entities coming in, because you just ruin the industry, the oversupply. So I think that the shall and the sale, the two words that our community has a problem with, it would be really nice if we could reach agreement on that, because we're just as legitimate as you guys. We represent just as many people, and our interests are just as valid. So wouldn't it be nice to have a bill that was more palatable to everyone and not just you guys?
I will make a commitment for the association that, especially Barbara will make sure you're on the list, but making sure that we get back to our members. One of the members I think is left was upset. We definitely had a email chain of information to our board of trustees, but we'll make sure that we get any changes, adjustments, discussions, summary discussions about this bill over time, and then you can pass that along to the committee here, et cetera.
Right,
Just
because
to
the bottom
keep that.
line in the sale concerns affect your trustees and your membership, not just us.
Oh,
when
absolutely.
you get large entities and oversupply, you really change the dynamics of the industry. So anybody fishing and paying their mortgage from fishing should pay attention to the concerns Wellfleet's raised, because we have such a long tradition of fishing. You don't want to solve the problem with your board of selectmen and then find out that you've got a worse problem, that your price on your oysters dropped to a point where you can't make a living. So.
Okay, fellow, it's noon, so Alfred's had his hand up, and then we,
I
Jenny, and
have a question for the gentleman. How many members of that 60, whatever you said, are actually from Wellfleet?
I can't tell you that, I don't know.
The gentleman next to you might be able to, since he's in charge.
I would say there's probably 4 or 5 members that, growers, I should say, in Wellfleet.
So you have 4 or 5 members?
Right.
And your job is to promote shellfishing. Is that correct?
No, represent the interests of the membership.
We wish there would be more members. We wish half of your.
And we have applications here if you want to apply.
We're working overtime. You were just mentioning, just let me finish, you were mentioning about supply and demand. If everybody keeps expanding aquaculture, there could be too many oysters. You all know that we're working with the state of Washington and Massachusetts to open up the EU, and that helps out the wholesalers to move extra oysters. I mean, that's a much bigger thing than the 261 growers in Wellfleet that are working on that, or wherever you sell your wholesale products to, those folks have to look down the road, a year, 5 years, 10 years down the road of the supply and demand. These are big, we're looking at bigger issues. We, obviously, this is an issue, and that's why we're here, and it's far more complicated than just growing shellfish year to year, things like that. So we have benefits to our organization. Yes, I wish we would have 5 times as many memberships. And I don't know if it's a pricing structure, if we're not hearing our members, but we're expanding, and 28 or 25 years ago when we started this, shellfishing wasn't a big deal. It's a big deal now. We need to have a louder voice. We need to have a better voice represented up in Boston, as well as at the federal level.
So my question, without all the discussion, was, out of those 4 or 5 people, do you actually consider where Wellfleet was such a pushback, contacting them?
They've been emailed on our list, or our constant contact list. Scott sends out, on my behalf, 2 or 3 notices a week about what's going on, where we're going, issues that are there, whether it has to do with the Vibrio control, reminding everybody of all of those rules and regulations.
That's a lot different than this building.
Well, it's a topic that's of concern right now from May 19th to October 19th. And if people aren't following it, which comes to the Shellfish Constables, the Mass Shellfishing Officers Association, that has to be fine-tuned with that, and making sure that everybody's complying with icing conditions and getting the products to market. I mean, it's complicated. So,
okay,
I don't know if that answers your question, but
no.
Awesome. Jenny?
I'll agree with that. Of those 4 to 5 people, you have 3 representatives on your board of trustees who are from Wellfleet. There were 2 here earlier, I think they've now left. So
how heavily weighted are their voices on those decisions when you can clearly see they don't represent the majority of wealthy shellfishermen? That's my question. You don't have to answer that now. My second thing is I did have a brief communication with Sarah Peak this morning, who was a working committee on this bill yesterday. She only had a 24-hour notice to get there. She sent one of her aides, so she's going to get a debrief today, so we'll have an update on that later. And then the third thing is, since our selectmen are here, and I know you all meet regionally with the other board of selectmen, is there a way that we can help Barnstable, you're out on the islands, is there a way that we can come together from a county perspective and help you guys a little bit so that this becomes, because I gotta tell you, it's not just Wellfleet against this. Eastham doesn't want it. Orleans, the people of Eastham don't want it. Chatham opposes it. Truro and Provincetown don't want this. So it's not just Wellfleet. You're looking at a huge regional issue. We've done a little outreach to Brewster, but only because it's only been 4 months. So I'm telling you, it's like, the Cape doesn't want this. You know, so if we can help you guys and our selectmen can reach out on the county level, let's do this. Let's protect our small people.
So, just, Bella, if somebody's signed up for a lot.
This is a disease of more. I mean, I'm just going to carry on what she's saying. The disease is going to be more oysters, more oysters. I mean, yeah, you're thinking this is a good thing, that you can cross state lines and bring them to, you know, Washington. I've lived in Seattle. Those oysters, they're gross.
Washington and Massachusetts are the only two that can sell the meat.
They bring stuff up from Virginia. The shelf life is only less than a week. By the time they put them in the bleach vats, they're dead. So you're transferring basically stuff that's going in the driveway.
No, you misunderstood the point I was making. It wasn't anything about transferring. It's about developing more markets.
But volume is what I'm talking about. Volume means lower price. To a small farmer, that means loss of livelihood, loss of family. Well, probably you're going to get divorced, and then you're going to go on, you know, whatever happens. So big corporations owning these grants and buying out everything else and moving in is not a good thing for us. I'm a wild harvester. I'm the only one in Eastham. Only one. Okay? There's a few, but they all have other things to do. In Eastham, it's run by the fire department. If you're on the fire department, you get a grant. Okay? That's just a small sign of what happens.
All right, one more thing. We need to wrap this up.
So we have spent in this town and in your organization, and frankly in the offices with the staff and the representative and the senator from this area, a huge amount of time on this. Now what Becca Taylor said is correct. A lot of bills get thought up like this and thrown into the hopper. One of the reasons I said I think we should pull the bill is let us not take up the time of our state legislatures in this way before you and we have fully worked this out. Because taking up time is a huge issue when you're trying to consider things and pass them. And I think it's taken up way more of my time. And if it had been thought carefully through, and a number of people told me about the night that this idea came up and where it happened, fair enough. Any idea is a good idea. Let's look at it, right? But to have it pushed to this degree, where we've all spent so much time on it before you fully investigated it with various different places that are using land like this, I think is a waste of your time and ours. I think that regs need to be considered very carefully before they're brought to the legislature.
All right, I think it's time I hope this has been a helpful discussion, and I really thank you for taking your time and coming this far. And how are we going to take all of this to make it work so that we can stay in touch about what's going on?
I would encourage any comments to go through you, the board, and send back to the Alcohol Association. Other than what we've heard here, we obviously weren't taking notes, so we didn't have to represent it. Maybe we can use this review, this table to review, this publicly available comment to get a document to get that information. But any other comments beyond that, I would say go through the board. Thank you for organizing.
Thank you. All right. Now, The meeting is now adjourned.